Welcome to the third show in the edition of the Property Forum Chat Show. We are here to talk about all landlord and investor related issues. We're here to kind of help you impart our experience and knowledge and try and help. There's a big Q&A session we'll be going through at the end of the show. And ultimately, we're just here to kind of give you some great content, hopefully, chat through some of the current issues, see what is happening in the world of property and investing, and to help you along on your journey. So this week, I'm very pleased to be joined by Vanessa Warwick. Vanessa is the co-founder of Property Tribes. She has been a landlord and investor for 17 years now. She's co-founded with Nick Tadd, and we are very pleased to have her on the show. Thank you, and welcome to the show, Vanessa.
Well, thank you, Nick. It's great to be on board.
Great to have you. And today, I mean, you know, leading on from that sort of basic introduction, we're obviously in the midst of COVID-19, so that can be pretty challenging. So I think a lot of the topics today will be based around that and helping, you know, people understand what we're seeing in the market and what's happening. We're also going to move on a little bit later to talking about property education. Property education is high on the agenda of people's minds at the moment, and obviously finding authentic property education can be a minefield and can be quite tricky, and there's lots of sort of horror stories out there at the moment and horrible situations that have happened that are being talked about a lot, and everyone's picking up on that. So we're going to talk about, you know, COVID-19, how landlords are reacting to that. We're going to move on chatting about the various strategies and how we sort of see those being affected. And then we'll move on to a sort of an education section, followed by a Q&A. And most importantly, for those watching live on YouTube, we want you to engage as much as possible. We've got a few emailed in questions, which is great. Thank you for that. But we're certainly going to be looking for you to chat live on YouTube. On the chat down the side, if you're looking at it on your desktop, to the right of the desktop, there's a chat screen. So please post your comments. I can see Manish, is that right? I apologize if that Ron's already commented. Say hi to Nick and Vanessa. Hello there. Thank you for your initial comment. Please ask questions. We don't mind multiple questions from the same person. It keeps the conversation going, and we're here to kind of answer your questions as best we can and try and impart some of our knowledge and just see what's happening in the world of property. So I think first and foremost really is talking about COVID-19 and kind of, you know, Vanessa and myself have two of the best known platforms online. Vanessa runs and co-runs Property Tribes. So I guess I'm sort of interested to discuss what we're seeing from other landlords as well as our own experiences. Vanessa, what are the kind of main topics and issues you're seeing landlords face at the moment?
Well, it's interesting, Nick, how it's developed over the last sort of 7 weeks since really when we went into lockdown, which was when the kind of real crisis really peaked. And it's always interesting whenever there's a crisis, the first kind of 48 hours are the most challenging to live through. They're the most frightening, the most uncertain. And it's, you know, during those first 48 hours, people are desperate for answers, but because it's such a fast evolving fluid situation, you're not going to get any answers that are really going to serve you. And it's always interesting when we have these kind of crisis periods, people that tend to make decisions in that very, very acute phase tend to regret it later. They don't tend to have the best outcomes. So when we first went into lockdown, Property Tribes was absolutely slammed with landlords worried about tenants not paying the rent and all the usual things that are amplified 1,000 times when we go into such, you know, uncharted waters. And such was the influx of new members and commentary that we immediately set up a special tribe or category dedicated solely to coronavirus advice, so that it could all be curated in one place, easy to reference. And literally just before lockdown, we were able to go quickly into London, observing all hygiene and social distancing measures. And we did an interview with landlord and tenant lawyer David Smith, just about the initial things that were concerning landlords. One of the main ones, of course, being able to gain access to properties if they needed gas safety certificates or any other issues like that. So a big flurry of questions came in the first sort of 48 hours, and we basically recommended that people, just let the world turn a couple of times, let
Good
it start
advice.
to calm down, let things become clearer, get the government guidance coming out, and really just to keep calm and spread kindness. And be kind to your tenants, be empathetic, and just see how it all starts to pan out. So that's what we did initially. And obviously, then the government started coming out with their guidance, and that caused a whole load of more problems.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? And that's great advice. I like the personal side to that advice as well, that where, it's not just about facts and figures and numbers and situations. It's about being, empathetic and sympathetic to all the people you're dealing with in business, and just saying, look, it's going to be a tricky time. Let's kind of assess things as we go. And, I really like that approach. And it's definitely easy for people to jump off the deep end, isn't it? The first couple of weeks of lockdown, actually, I strongly believe I had the virus. I haven't been tested yet, but that first couple of weeks, which was back in mid-March now, I think it was sort of transpiring. It was horrible. Sat on my sofa, bedridden, full sort of flu-like symptoms, all of this kind of stuff, a lack of taste, splitting headaches, and seeing the world collapse around me, and I couldn't do anything because I was dead, dead on my bed, literally. It was horrible. So I was sort of panicking in my head at that point, and I felt very out of control. And I think we probably all felt a similar feeling, very out of control to start with. What on earth is this going to do? And I have good days and bad days where I'm sort of thinking Armageddon's going to happen, and then it doesn't, and it's like, oh, actually some positive signs are starting to come out of that. And very quickly after that first couple of weeks of my panic mode, we've just put things in place. We've worked really, really hard on the letting side of the business, and the two main sides to our business is the development business and the landlord business from the existing stock that we've kept. So and those both had to be treated very differently, obviously. So yeah, I like that advice, is kind of deal with things as you go. And we've had 2 really good months with rent now, which we've been extremely fortunate with. We worked very hard for that, and we've done certain things to help that situation unfold, which hopefully we'll cover some of those in a moment anyway. But yeah, as you say, it's kind of taking it as it comes, and some really exciting news this week with the bounce back loans. For me, that's been a really positive thing for landlords and investors and businesses that have been able to apply for these. And we've, across our businesses, we've been able to apply for a few of those and get them. And we've had that money hit in the matter of sort of 24, 48 hours, incredibly quick. So the government really is, unlike 2008, the government really has stepped up here. As they said, they're not going to be able to help everyone. That's not possible, but they've done a huge amount to help a lot of people. And it's absolutely incredible what they've done. Totally unprecedented. What do you think about it, Dylan? Dylan the cat there making his cameo.
I think it's really interesting that you've mentioned the bounce back loans, Nick, because again, this is where government communication has actually been in need of clarity. There's been a lot of discussion online whether landlords are actually eligible for them due to the 50% trading element that's required to be eligible for them. And I was contacted by one of the government offices 2 days ago, asking me to share some information with them on this topic, how landlords what's being said about it on social media, what advice is being given on YouTube, and this kind of thing, because they're actually going to look into it and perhaps even give some clarification on that. So obviously, if you're developing and trading, no issue at all. But if you're just a landlord with a passive investment, there's a strong chance that you actually don't qualify. And indeed, one of the trending topics on Property Tribes has been landlords actually are falling through the gaps of a lot of this government support. Now, we did have the opportunity of taking a 3-month mortgage holiday, which again is extremely poor communication on behalf of the government, because it's not a mortgage holiday at all, it's a mortgage deferment.
Yep,
And
very true.
the use of that word, which was what I was alluding to earlier, immediately sparked tenant unions, tenant action groups, the likes of Shelter and Generation. Well, look, landlords are taking a 3-month mortgage holiday, so you don't need to pay your rent for 3 months. And this has caused a lot of landlords a lot of problems, and we're seeing it on lots of different forums and social media, that landlords are having tenants saying, well, you're getting a payment holiday, so I'm not going to pay my rent. So it really does go back to communicating these messages very, very clearly. And if I may, Nick, you just mentioned about that I had a personal message earlier. Property is a people business. It always has been. And we are in unprecedented times where everybody is suffering on some level. And I think it's at times like this when landlords who have really nurtured the relationships with their tenants, they're going to be the ones that come out of this, because they have that relationship. They're able to negotiate with their tenants and come to some kind of payment plan, some arrangement to maintain the tenancy. Those landlords that don't have those relationships, who are very businesslike, very unempathetic, I think they're going to find it a lot harder to get through this.
That's very, very good advice, actually. And the approach we've taken, and a moment ago I touched on why I think we're doing so well in retaining the rents that we've got and keeping the tenants we've got, as well as still attracting some new tenants, is exactly that reason. We've been very strong with our communication right from day one. We've said, look, if you're experiencing significant difficulty, please work with us and show us some evidence of that. Tell us about your situation. I've personally been on the phone to a number of tenants. We have a full-time letting manager based out of the Thames Valley, our Reading office, and she's obviously our first port of call to the tenants. But we have a very good relationship, and they all know her. Even with best part of 200 tenants, they all know Stephanie, and it's a very personal service. So, and I'm stepping in as the landlord as well. And I wouldn't normally speak to a lot of these tenants, but that approach of saying, look, we understand you're having your difficulties with the rent. Just wanted to see what your situation was and how we can help that. And like you said, there is a case of communicating back from that initial knee-jerk reaction of tenants saying, "Oh, do I get a rent payment holiday?" We've had to all sort of backtrack from that and say, "Look, well, no, actually, that's not the case. Your rent is still owed, and we're going to have to, work with you to get that paid. We can be flexible about it being paid to a point, but bear in mind, you don't want to slip into arrears unless you absolutely have to. And if you're just furloughed and you can still easily afford your rent, then you do need to be paying it and prioritising it. Most people won't be spending anything like what they normally spend in lockdown. They won't be going out for dinners and restaurants and cinemas and holidays and all this kind of stuff. So actually that 20% from the furlough is quite a sensible thing from the government, because everyone can live comfortably, should be able to live comfortably. I'm not making a huge sweeping statement there, but the majority of people should be able to live comfortably on 80% of what they had in the current situation, where they won't be spending as much. So yeah, definitely communication, absolutely critical.
Well, one of the first things we did, Nick, was we worked with a solicitor, David Smith, to create a template letter to respond to tenants who were saying that they couldn't pay their rent.
Excellent.
So we immediately got that resource up there within, I think it was the first 12 hours of lockdown. Fantastic. It was very quick that we got it up there, and that's been used by hundreds, if not thousands, of landlords who have reported back that it's helped manage the situation. So,
excellent.
It's nice kind of to lead on what we're going to say later about, sources of information that can genuinely assist.
Yeah, definitely. So if anyone needs the copy of that letter, presumably that's on Property Tribes. They should be able to find that, looking at the sort of COVID-19.
Just put template into the search box and it will bring it up.
Excellent. Thank you. Really helpful. So, and there might be landlords that are only experiencing difficulty now because the effects may be kicking in only after a month or two. And, with furlough now obviously being extended till October, we don't know how long this is likely to go on. It might be that the first couple of months people are able to pay from their savings and it's going to start to get worse before it gets better. We don't know. It's all very unknown at the moment, isn't it? But certainly things like
I
that
think
will
it's going to
help.
get worse, Nick, because obviously there are people still on furlough who actually won't have a job to go back to. They are actually going to be
True.
made redundant. They're just not
Yeah.
aware of it yet. We're going to
Yeah.
have people that feel that they are in the vulnerable category who quite understandably
Yeah.
don't want to go back to work. So, you know, there's issues going to be going forward with them, perhaps moving on to universal credit or LHA. So we haven't begun to see the fallout of this yet, I don't think. And this is why I said right at the beginning that in the very acute phase, that's not the time to be making decisions. You literally are just scrabbling in the dark. You've really got to just sit patiently and wait to see how this all pans out. And we can't compare it to anything else because it's
No,
never happened in any of
completely
our
new.
in any of our lifetimes, really.
I guess just
Um,
work harder and smarter as well. Rather than, don't make rash decisions in on big level decisions,
mm,
like selling a property or indeed possibly buying a property unless you're confident there isn't further crash coming. But work hard with what you've got. I guess consolidate your existing portfolio, work extremely hard on that, and try and do everything you can to keep that cash flow coming in, whilst looking at any government help that you are legitimately able to claim. You're
course.
better off taking and there are differing opinions on this, interestingly, differing opinions on some of the panel on property summits, which I was obviously working with, last week we put out property summits. So incidentally, if you do like good, authentic property education, visit propertysummits.com for that. If you've missed it, I'm sure some of you saw it. So definitely, similar with myself and some other leading industry experts chatting about all this kind of stuff as well. But
Well, I'll second that. It was excellent. I was tuned in, and as
thank you.
always, the 5 panelists and Kate Faulkner delivered incredible information, really, really
She's great.
authentic, really useful, and really viable in the current circumstances.
Yeah, and I think we'll get onto this later, but it's critical, isn't it, to I guess weed out the wheat from the chaff and get to genuine facts that are backed up by genuine experience. And more than ever, that's going to become critical in property education, as those decisions can make or break people and can lose them a huge amount of money. But we will get onto education a bit more later. I actually wanted to ask you, before we move on to discussing specific strategies, have you yourself experienced any issues with your tenants? What have those been? I know you run some holiday lets, so what problems have you seen, and have you got any tips specific to your portfolio that you would recommend that people might better do?
Well, our holiday let agent actually shut down the bookings when lockdown started, and a
Crikey.
number of refunds
That's
had to be made. That didn't affect me per se because I'd not received the money,
okay.
because the bookings hadn't taken place. So I have taken that opportunity to have the property completely refurbished. Which it did need. So
Okay.
I've put that downtime to good use,
Excellent.
and
Great
I
idea.
believe that they're going to open up the bookings again from the beginning of June. And I suspect that UK holiday lets are going to have an absolute bonanza few years because people are just not going to be traveling abroad
Good point.
for obvious reasons. UK holidays are going to be in extremely high demand. Brits are going to fall back in love with the great British seaside holiday.
Yeah.
It's really interesting in times of kind of depression or worry, people always turn to nostalgia to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
And you and I, when we grew up, we remember our childhood holidays by the seaside with donkey rides and candy floss and sandcastles and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And parents are going to reconnect with that, and they're going to want to take their kids on a British seaside holiday. So I am expecting absolute bonanza couple of 3-4
Awesome.
years for UK holiday
So
lets
there's
in
a
good
tip. Go and buy a
location.
holiday let.
Huh?
Go and buy a holiday let. That's a great tip in itself, isn't it?
Well, yes,
Not
with
just on that one
caveats, of
piece of
course.
advice, mind you.
With regard to just single occupancy buy-to-let, I've only had one tenant not pay the rent. They wrote to me and
Right.
said, we're not going to pay any rent during lockdown at all. And I wrote back mainly using the template letter from Property Tribes, but I basically said, look, I'm here to help. I understand, it's very challenging times. We're all in this together. Unfortunately, I can't agree to zero rent during lockdown because I have no idea how long it's going to last. But what I can agree to is a 50% reduction for April and May. And they immediately came back and agreed to that and made the 50% payment there, straight away. Hopefully they're going to do the same this month, and then I shall have to make inquiries as to their employment position at the end of May to see if they can start going back onto a regular payment, and obviously look to run down the arrears through a payment plan.
Excellent.
But I have to say, it's again at times like this when your portfolio is really put to the test, and we've always gone for good quality properties, mainly in London and the southeast, and some in the home counties, with good quality families, or young professional tenants who want to stay for a while, and that again is paying dividends. I'm hearing of other landlords who unfortunately have tenants that 9 out of 10 have stopped paying the rent. So again, portfolios are going to be put to the test big time over the next couple of years, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example of diversification as well, to have different properties in also different areas, but also potentially different types of property strategy under your umbrella. That's often a really good thing, or different grades of property. So for us in our portfolio, we have cheap, smaller HMOs, still professional HMOs. So they're very good quality, but they're smaller. Like a three. I think the smallest we've got is a 4 or a 5 bed, right up to sort of 12 bed HMOs, and we've got 2 of those next to each other. So that's essentially a 24 bed HMO, much larger rooms, and then higher than that, micro studios and larger studios. So we've kind of got a breadth of price point. So we're able to actually see from that, out of the kind of 200 odd tenants we've got, see where the difficulties are. And it was really interesting. The first month we had 20 voids coming up, and that was through natural selection actually, because we have people hand their notice in. We ask for 2 months notice. In reality, they only legally have to give 1, but we ask for 2, and most people honour that out of goodwill, which is great. I would say 9 out of 10 people actually honour a longer notice period. And those were kind of before lockdown. So those were natural turnovers. But then we're like, in the middle of lockdown, we've got to refill those rooms. So we noticed that all the studios were the ones that we were struggling to re-let. And the reason for that was the price point. They were more expensive. So we immediately dropped the price of the void studios that were coming up that month. And the viewings were not working well until that point. And we dropped them by about 15-20%. And they rented in like 2 or 3 days, literally. It was unbelievable. Stephanie, our lettings manager, literally let, I think, 8 units in one 24-hour period, which spanned 2 days. It was unbelievable night and day change on that tweak in the rent. And that was just a sort of a 3-month rent reduction for those units to recognise the market conditions. So yeah, definitely diversification, whether it's location, product type, strategy, really good tip. So thank you for sharing.
Also, I think with area, Nick, there's going to be industries that are decimated
Absolutely.
by coronavirus, particularly the aviation industry.
Yeah.
They're talking about laying off 3/4 of the British Airways pilots.
Yeah.
So any towns around airports where there's a large population of airport workers,
Yeah.
I can see hard times coming there. That has impacted onto Rolls-Royce, who make the engines for aviation, and they're talking of laying off about 8,000 people in Derby, I think it was. I saw.
Wow.
Forgive me if I've got that wrong, but I know it was a big number. So you need to be thinking or understanding what industries your tenants are operating in as well, to see if there might be future problems. Clearly, LHA UC rates have been increased dramatically by the government, up to 30% in some cases, as a response to coronavirus. So, all landlords right now need to be understanding how to use how to engage with the DWP. We've got a fantastic video on that topic with Bill Irvine, one of the top people in the country on this particular area of knowledge. Because all of our tenants are only, a P45 away from going into, wanting to having to go onto housing benefits. So I think landlords who previously perhaps felt that wasn't an area that they were going to operate in are going to have to educate themselves of how to engage with universal credit and LHA, because it is going to be growing.
Yeah, and I think if you are potentially an HMO landlord operating that area already, you're probably rubbing your hands with glee because you're already in that field and you know it very well and you've got a hold in it. So there's potentially an opportunity there. What do you think, just before we move on to another question, can I ask anyone that's watching live, jump onto the chat, ask the questions in the chat down the side. Thank you, Sarah King, Craig Casey, Howard R, Jerry Henry and Silvana, and also Manesh, get that right again, all commenting in that section. We've got a few from email we'll answer later, but also please, questions now. As we're going, whack in a question. If you've got any questions at all, please engage. We'd love to help you and love to bring those questions live, bring them up on screen and discuss them for you. We're touching on HMOs there, Vanessa. I've obviously got a good chunk of the portfolio HMOs, not all of it, but probably a good 30 to 40% of it, something of that, guesswork, that kind of region. We've got, I think, 5 voids this week, and we've got only £400 in outstanding rent from nearly 200 units. So we're seeing that market in my field, which is professional lets, in the Thames Valley region, the southeast region. So it's kind of Andover, Reading, Newbury, that sort of triangle out in the Thames Valley. Extremely good occupancy and demand. If the rent's priced correctly for those studios at the moment, HMO rooms are going probably less than 10% undervalued just to get them away, but hardly anything reduced on the HMO room. So potentially could be an increase in demand from that in certain areas. It's obviously completely location specific. People always ask that question about HMOs. It's very, very specific to certain areas. But I know when I was talking to you the other day, you mentioned about HMOs and you thought those were going to be particularly hard hit. What's your opinion on HMOs in general, and if you feel they're going to be hard hit or not? Can you give some background on the locations and specifically your opinions and what you're seeing on that, obviously, on Property Tribes?
Yeah, I think it's really that I think the whole coronavirus lockdown it is going to amplify a lot of things that probably weren't an issue before, but will start to crystallize in people's minds as a potential issue. And we've had stories on Property Tribes of tenants saying that one member of the household wasn't observing hygiene protocols and social distancing and lockdown, and it caused a lot of problems within the shared household. I think in future, a general trend will see people wanting much more of their own space, just because they've been in surroundings where they've been with other people that perhaps haven't behaved in a manner that helped them when they were feeling the strain of being in lockdown. I think we are going to see rents decrease. The market only actually officially opened yesterday, so if you've let properties through lockdown, you will have been in the minority, because actually there was guidance not to, obviously if there were existing tenants and things like that, you couldn't go there. If they were empty, then fair enough, that's not an issue. But the market is unlocked and there is huge volumes of property coming onto the market for sales and rent. Some people will be in desperate situations. They will be looking to reduce prices, whether it's sales or rent. So I feel that the whole, market is going to go down. So that means that 1-bedroom flats may start to come into the budget of somebody that typically might have rented an ensuite bedroom. And they may want to make that move. It's really hard to say, because we're just in this next phase now. The market unlocked yesterday, and all we can say for certain is that it has regenerated in a big tidal wave of activity. But we're now, as it starts to settle, we're going to see where the holes are in the whole thing, where the flaws and the issues are and the problems. So it's too soon to really say if any particular type of strategy is going to be affected, but we need to really look at it from the point of view of people's behavior, and how being in lockdown and being in this crisis might change the way they think. I mean, there's already a lot of talk that homeowners are going to want to look for properties with good gardens, because gardens really came into their own during this crisis. So we may see a
Good point.
shift, that gardens become a lot more popular.
Yeah.
We may see that a change in working habits, that people actually companies actually realize that people can work from home and still maintain everything that they need to do. So we may see that more and more people start to work from home. Therefore, they don't need to be commuter distance to big cities. So we're going to see massive changes in the next 2 to 3 years, as this all starts to come out in the wash. And none of us really know for sure. And again, we can only go back to those solid fundamentals of trying to be a good, ethical, compliant landlord, who really does think about tenants, tenant demographics, what they need, and serves those needs. Mm. No, I totally agree. We've always said find the demand before you create the supply. And a lot of people create the supply and then hope that there's a demand for what they've provided. That's far more risky. You need to look actually where the demand is and then see how you can serve that demand. But again, it's going to be hard to tell, in the initial kind of aftermath of everything that's gone on.
Yeah, it's really funny actually. When I'm mentoring clients, I do one-to-one mentoring with clients. One of the key things that they come to me with is sourcing and saying, I'm being sent all these deals. I don't know how to do the due diligence. How do I know what is good, what is bad? And I say, well, what's your strategy? They're like, oh, I don't know. Maybe an HMO, maybe a buy-to-let, maybe do some Airbnb, and this kind of stuff. And it absolutely horrifies me to, see
Yeah, those kind of landlords, they are going to struggle going forward,
They will, they will,
because this is going to be a very unforgiving situation in the next 1 to 2 years, in my opinion.
definitely.
And people are going to have to, really get a lot more professional feel about
Uh,
everything that they're doing, because of the unforgiving circumstances, for sure. And it's quite interesting because it's kind of good timing, actually, because my husband Nick has just acquired a small shareholding in a property portfolio management
Oh, excellent.
platform called Lendlord. And
Fantastic.
this is an absolutely cracking piece of software that totally analyzes your portfolio and will help you see all the weaknesses in it and all the strengths. And one of the things that landlords should be doing is stress testing their portfolios on LHA and UC rates, and not just private sector rents. Landlord has a facility that allows you to do that. So this is going to be the era of we've been saying this for ages, actually, but even more so, it's going to be the era of the educated, informed, empathetic
Yeah,
landlord.
definitely.
Definitely, that's what it's going to
Well, I
be.
just lost sound there briefly on my microphone. I think I might have muted myself when I made that last comment. So there's a couple of people saying they lost sound. Apologies for that, guys. Just a quick recap on the bits that we were talking about there. I started off talking about sourcing and making sure that instead of, the best tip on sourcing is rather than looking at all the deals that are being thrown to you, it's about looking at your strategy first, possibly the location, and building it backwards, going back to then looking at the deals. So you're working from a choice of strategy, choice of location, viewpoint, and demand from tenants, working back up to looking at the deals themselves. And when you've got that laser focused on what you're looking for, you'll be amazed at how quickly you can acquire deals and get rid of all the other deals you're getting sent that just won't be appropriate. So I think yours was all caught there, Vanessa, because you weren't on mute. I stupidly left my button on mute, so apologies there. Still learning this modern technology. Thanks for all the questions coming in. Some good questions still coming in. What have we got? Well, we've got some good ones here. We'll leave a few of these to the end, but got some, loads of people saying no sound. So there's lots, you see, all of you guys are watching, but you're not asking questions. I've got like 20 people say there's no sound. So get questions in, please, please, please. Get more questions in. Right, so we've talked about your HMOs specifically. With I guess with holiday lets as well, just sort of going back to that briefly. You believe that's going to be an area to boom, but what about when would you, if you were looking at buying a holiday let now, Vanessa, when would you be looking to acquire that? Would you hold off for another month or two, or is it about trying to pick the bottom, or you know what, it's a good time now anyway, because there's never a bad time if you invest for the long
Well,
term.
I think there's that fantastic saying, which I actually got from Mr. Paul Mahoney of Nova Financial, and he says it's not timing the market, it's time in the market.
Good comment.
And
Yeah.
all of us have to be looking long term. It's not something to get involved with for 2 or 3 years. We're talking 15, 20 years. It's always been a long horizon investment. It's going to stay that way. So in terms of buying a holiday let, there's many advantages to them, which we won't have time to go through on this occasion. We do have lots of content generated mainly by myself on this topic of why holiday lets are so good, because obviously they're not subject to Section 24. So that can help out if landlords are in a
Good
higher rate
tip.
tax bracket. Again, it's finding the right property in the right place, making sure that you get it for the best possible price. Particularly, I think in current circumstances, I would be looking for properties where I can force the appreciation through refurbishment or development. I think that really does build in an equity buffer.
Massively.
Um,
Yeah.
and we've seen for probably the last 5 years, we've seen the rise of what's called the staycation, where people want to take long weekends, and I think that's only set to continue. So my
Agree.
advice is, if you're looking for a holiday let, it's got to be within a 2-hour drive of a major population density, because people want to leave the city or their home area, and they want to be sitting on a balcony or on some decking, drinking a glass of wine within an hour and a half to 2 hours later. So this is why we favour the south coast for our holiday lets. And for instance, we've got our lovely little award-winning development down at Camber Sands with a beautiful cladded fisherman's cottage adjacent to the beach.
Lovely.
That sleeps four. And you can be out of London and be there within an hour and a half on a Friday evening. And it's incredible when you go down to Camber at the weekends, it's just full of wealthy Londoners that have come down for the weekend. So the demand is there all year round for these long weekends. And if you buy a good holiday let, I'm a big fan of coastal holiday lets, again for many reasons which we don't have time to go into today. But coastal holiday lets appeal to a very wide demographic like families as well. And they're going to be popular. People love that British seaside holiday. So close to a good beach is going to serve you well going forwards. So all I can really say is just check out the Holiday Lets Tribe on Property Tribes. We've got loads of good content in there about sourcing a good holiday let.
Excellent. I'm going to do a little plug as well, if I may, on my own book, Investing in International Real Estate. We're talking about holiday lets. We're talking about areas of investing. It would be rude not to plug my book because there is so much free content in there, and we're about to move on to education. And I think, one of the reasons for writing this book was, and it is a massive book in terms of property education, 380 odd pages of the lot. I think it's 360. And there's everything in there: HMOs, straight buy to lets, lease options, rent to rent, serviced accommodation, holiday lets, JVs, finance, pretty much all the top 10, 12 strategies that are out there in the property investment world that people are spending tens of thousands of pounds on in the property education world. That's all got it. So everything in there, HMOs, holiday lets, you name it. Go and buy that for 15 quid on Amazon. It's on there now. Type in my name, Nicholas Wallwork. Saves you 20 grand on certain people's courses that are out there. So, don't waste your money. Right, Vanessa, what are we going to talk about? Let's talk about... there's a question actually I wanted to ask you. I don't actually know the answer to this, so I don't know if you've seen online. Hopefully you can educate me, but if you can't, don't panic. It's about landlords owning property abroad, and actually I'm thinking about it flip side, foreign investors owning property here. Would they get any of these mortgage breaks, do you think? Are other countries, have you seen any other countries offering the kind of support that the British government's been, affording us?
No, I haven't. And when this crisis started, I actually wrote quite a long article about why I wouldn't be applying for a mortgage deferment.
Okay.
Because as I mentioned right at the beginning, when you're in the crisis mode, don't make decisions because they won't have a good outcome, because you don't actually know what's coming down the pipe at you, and you never play your ace card when you don't even know what the game is. And it's subsequently been, and it's just starting to come down the pipe now in the last couple of days, that new lender criteria, because obviously all the buy-to-let products were pretty much pulled after we went into lockdown, disappeared, or loan to values dropped very significantly down to around 65% typically. They're all starting to come back now, which is really, really positive. I've seen a 75% LTV come out today, and there is talk of some 85%, obviously in the minority, but good. But the lender criteria is now starting to say that you can't apply for them if you've taken a mortgage deferment.
Oh, really? They're tricky buggers, aren't they, the finances? I mean, it's one of those things. It's a double-edged sword, because we've taken a few where possible, purely because it's the cheapest finance we're ever going to get, quite frankly. And it's better to have cash. My view of it, I'd rather have a cash buffer in the bank and then repay it at the end of the 12 months if needed, than not apply for it, the money run out, and then us get into difficulty in months 5 and 6 of this lockdown. So that was kind of my reasonings for applying for a few of them. And you're right, it's kind of like, then they sort of double-edged sword. It's like on each one, I might add, specifically asked for their confirmation that it wouldn't affect any future lending, there wouldn't be any black marks, wouldn't be any effect on credit or applying for mortgages in the future. But yet,
well, it won't be on your credit
no,
rating,
you'll
but
be asked.
you will be asked that
Yeah.
question in the mortgage application. Have you taken a mortgage
Yeah.
deferment? So it's not the same as saying it won't be on your credit rating.
No,
It won't. But they've covered it this way, and I think that, you know, looking from the lender's point of view, anybody that within a week of this being, you know, lockdown and all the crisis around that, anybody that immediately jumped to say they were in financial difficulty and needed help, you know, they're going to know that. Now, I'm not saying that I'm never going to use the mortgage deferment holiday, but I am going to keep it as the ace in my back pocket if I need it going forwards, because I do believe that there's a lot more fallout to come, and I want to keep that ace in my back pocket. And should the time come when I need it, I've got something.
Yeah, that's fair point.
But you know, that's I just looked at it from the lender's point of view. And if your business, and this is not you, Nicholas, but just generally the royal you, if your business is such that it starts to fail within 2 weeks of something, you know, of like a black swan event, then banks are going to look at that and think, well, how robust was your business? Was it just on, you know, surviving on the slimmest of margins?
Definitely.
So it will be interesting to see. Some banks may not do this, but gradually starting to see this come into their criteria.
Definitely. I mean, what I've seen so far, and we're applying for a refinance at the moment of a finished site. Speaking to 2 lenders, and I think we'll probably, touch wood, be going with Shawbrook on this one actually. But we're also talking to West One Loans, a slightly niche lender. Both of them requested, they did ask that question, so I was aware that those questions are being asked. But what they did ask was that we would have 3 months savings or cash buffer to demonstrate that we wouldn't need to apply for it with them, and that we could cover the full rent for the next 3 months if we draw down today and we can't pay the rent. You know, there's no rent coming in for 3 months, we could afford that. So that's, you know, we might see a hybrid of that. We might see some people declining loans based on that, you know, and you'll never know, but they'll just not give you the loan, find another reason not to give it to you. Or some lenders might ask for some sort of proof of funds. So, you know, that's definitely, definitely seeing that. And I sort of, when you mentioned it to start with, I didn't quite put 2 and 2 together. We were sort of talking about the same thing there. So, but I think there will be lenders that will decline to lend potentially. We'll have to see, won't we? It's tricky times, you know.
Well, we live in interesting times.
Yeah, interesting times.
And I think they're going to get more interesting in ways that we can't even begin to imagine.
There's no right or wrong answer either. And even us as experienced landlords and investors and you know, all that kind of knowledge that we have doesn't prepare you for this. And you've got to make the best decision you think. Whichever one you make, there's going to be some sort of repercussion or lost opportunity or benefit. Trying to figure it out. So keep questions coming in, please, guys. I think it's about time we started talking about property education, something you've been not the quietest mouse on the planet, Vanessa. So, you know, let's get talking about it. And, you know, what I think, you know, to start off with, you know, and we've discussed this many times, so apologise for your benefit if you have to hear my theory about property education again. But my main theory about property education is really that, you know, it's this funnel. And, you know, I've talked about it in seminars, I've talked about it online, we've spoken about it many times. And it's about, you know, getting all the free and cheap education you can get at the top of that funnel before you sort of graduate yourself to more expensive versions of education, like these courses and whatnot. So, you know, go on Property Tribes, go on Property Forum, go on all the other property forums out there. That'll all be free information. You know, we on Property Forum have got lots of resources and educational ebooks. There's obviously all the chat sections, all the stuff Vanessa's mentioned at the beginning of this. There are template letters that they've created with solicitors at Property Tribes. You can go and download that. If you could actually pop that in the comments after, Vanessa, that would be greatly appreciated for people that are watching. So I think that'll be useful for people. They may well be needing that. You know, it's about kind of getting all this free information, self-taught stuff as much as you can. And then you might buy a book. You know, you might buy a book, you know, a very cheap 15 quid book on Amazon. or many other books. You know, I've read every single book going. I've read all of my peers' books. I've read people that have done one HMO and think they can write a book. I've read their book, right up to the likes of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and all these kind of people. So, and I do believe success in general can be taught. And I believe that there's a funnel process to education. Education has absolutely got its place in any industry. Our industry is tricky because it's so unregulated. There's very little, very little regulation in the whole industry, full stop, let alone in the education sector in property. So, I'd advise anyone that's looking to learn more about it, get off your butt and do the stuff you can do for free. There are some cheap Udemy courses even that will probably have some useful information in. But you need to, be a sponge and absorb all this useful online stuff, and then move down the chain to kind of, maybe working with mentors. And I do one-to-one mentoring, as you know, working on some cheaper courses that are well researched, and the people behind them are, are credible, and they've got a good track record. They're ethical in the way they're doing business, and they're not sort of upselling you to the next latest and greatest course without letting you know there's going to be an upsell. And I think, there are good ethical education providers out there that clearly there's an upsell. You're not going to go to any free seminar and not expect there to be a lead on. And they're usually upfront about that, and it's usually on their website. So, but there are others that are not, and you get kind of, hoodwinked into a run to the back of the room type deal. And that's what's attracted so much adverse, press and attention, hasn't it? So, I guess, what's your opinion on property education? Reiterate for us that they may not know you and may not have heard your opinions on property education. I've just expressed mine and my wonderful funnel analogy, and kind of a process to education. Give me your overview, and then most importantly, how do you think that's changing now with it going online? Is it going to spring up more of these kind of online gurus that can stream and do a better job of me of not leaving the mute button on? And think they can train people, and that's fine. So, what do you think the online world that we're possibly in now is going to do to the property education industry?
Well, first of all, Nick and I are massive advocates of education. We've dedicated the last 11 years of our lives to providing it. So we love property education. It's absolutely vital. It mitigates risk. It fast tracks you. You can have other people's hindsight be your foresight. It's absolutely vital. It's the biggest thing you will ever buy in your life, probably. And you need to understand what you're doing from every angle. So we are big fans of authentic property education.
Good
Now,
word.
you talked about the marketing funnel and the upgrade from the book to the seminar, etc. The big thing for us is people get into the wrong marketing funnels.
Yes.
And there's two sides to our sector. There's the private rented sector, which is landlords and property investors. And then there's what we call the wealth creation industry. The wealth creation industry has very, very, very little to do with property. I actually listened to an online webinar for 2 hours a few days ago, and the word tenant was not mentioned once. Tenants are your clients.
That's scary.
If you don't understand them, you ain't going to have a business because you're not going to receive the rent. So Property Tribes operates on the private rented sector side of everything. The wealth creation industry, it's nothing to do with us.
No.
It's like I don't know, it's me being interested in motorhoming and going to a knitting circle. It's nothing to do with what I'm about on a daily basis.
No.
So
and it goes back to what we talked about earlier, doesn't it? About working from the tenant first back up to a strategy, rather than looking at property as an investment and it's a money-making machine. That's not the way to look at it. It's kind of the way of looking at a similar thing, isn't it? And thus how you treat that throughout the whole of your business.
Well, it's the business, Nick. It is a business, and you have to wear a business hat. And if you don't think about servicing the needs of your clients, as I call them, or tenants, then you're not going to have a very happy business journey. You know, there are forms of authentic property education, such as the National Residential Landlords Association, which runs webinars, has offline events as well, such as the absolutely wonderful Mr. John Howard, who puts on these fantastic day courses for £250 to £500
Yeah,
worth every
excellent
single
value.
penny. Been on one of them myself. Um, Arla run an HMO management course. There are forms of authentic information that are going to give you real life information to be able to run this business.
Definitely.
Now,
Don't forget
in the
property
wealth
summits. Should I
creation
get a little
sector,
pitch in for property summits there at the right moment? That's again
yeah, and property summits.
very, very
But
cheap.
you know, the wealth creation sector, and this infuriates certain quarters of the industry, but I call it buying a ticket to see a unicorn. Um, what they're
Yeah,
selling actually, you know, is not reality. Now there will be people that have been through those marketing funnels and have done well, and you know, good for them. I salute them, but they probably started off with quite significant funds behind them. Unfortunately, more and more and more, the wealth creation sector is going for more vulnerable people that don't have money, and enticing them into things like rent to rent and lease options and so on, and that's where things start to, you know, go wrong, and people end up putting £20,000 course on a credit card when they don't have a job. So that's not going to have a happy ending. And you know, you can people say, oh, you've got to take action, you've got to take action. Well, you have got to take action, but if you don't have the funds, no matter all the action you take in the world, you are going to struggle.
you really
So
are.
it
Yeah,
becomes, you know, finance is the lifeblood of an asset building business like property, and you do need money. Now, even
good.
if you could get into a property deal without having a 25% deposit, there's still compliance costs, there's still repairs and maintenance, there's all the legal costs, stamp duty, acquisition costs. You know, boiler goes wrong, that could be £1,500 to £3,000 to replace. I think it was 3 boilers go wrong in 3 months.
Ouch.
I had to find, you know, 3 lots of £1,500 in a very short space of
Yeah,
time.
it
Now,
happens,
if you've
doesn't it?
got low value properties up north that are bringing in £450 a month rent, a boiler going wrong is going to wipe out your profit for months.
Yeah,
So
and
it's not quite the same as if you've got a property in the southeast that's bringing in £2,000 a month rent.
and
So these are all the things to consider. And the biggest thing for me is that, you know, in the wealth creation sector, you don't hear the word tenant.
no, well, fair enough. And Dylan obviously clearly has an opinion as well on this topic. He's
Yes,
been
he's meowing in the background.
vocal in the background.
He's just had a cushion thrown at him.
He's not the true co-founder of Property Tribes, is he, Vanessa?
Sorry,
He's not the true
Dylan.
co-founder, is he? And Nick's just in the background, you know?
Yeah, Nick's listening in the background with our 3 Bengal tiger cats,
Oh, Bengals, beautiful.
and that they're our office assistants.
Brilliant. I've got a little tiny doggy. He's upstairs. I've heard him barking as we've been going.
Yes,
But
Dylan specialises in paper shredding.
this is the beauty of working from home, isn't it? Like, you know, again, online education at the moment, I think, again, I guess the message is as strong as ever from both of us and our respective platforms that, you know, finding that authentic education is going to be more important than ever. Sorry. You know, anyone can go online, anyone can live stream on Zoom or Skype or whatever software you're using. So very quickly they can get out to a market, they can do some flashy brochures and a bit of social media paid advertising and start to pull you in. I've seen some horrific people, you know, promoting certain products and HMO walk rounds of their buildings, and they've got like 3 HMOs, you know, and you're like, seriously, you have not made it if you've got 3 HMOs and you've only been doing it 18 months. It's just
No, you need
crazy.
to have been in the game for 10 years
Yeah,
before you should think about becoming any kind of trainer or mentor. That's how
absolutely.
long it takes to really get to understand this industry. I think, Nick, the really important thing to point out about both our platforms is that they are a hive mind of knowledge, experience,
Definitely.
opinion. That is very, very healthy. You want to be getting your information from a hive mind. You don't want to be getting it from a singularity. Now, these property trainers and gurus who've come to the fore in the last few months for all the wrong reasons, they develop such a mindset in their followers that their followers will only get information from them, and that plays into their hands. And it's unhealthy. The biggest way you can learn is take in lots of different inputs, mull them all over in your own mind, test them against your own opinion. I seek out people that don't agree with me because that is the best way for me to learn. I don't
Yeah,
want
no,
people
that's a good
running
way of
around me
looking at it, I
telling me how
guess.
wonderful and knowledgeable I am. It doesn't help me
No.
learn anything. I actively go onto sites that don't like landlords, and I go and look at what they're saying about the property market, about whether there's going to be a housing crash, all this good stuff. And I take in what they say and I test my opinion against it. And very often I'll go, okay, I'm going to change my view on that slightly, and that's healthy. Now, if you get your inputs from a singularity, like a mentor or a guru that shuts down any negative commentary or says, "Oh, we don't have neg heads in our group," or we don't allow negativity in our group, that is a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
going to get a rounded, fair view, and ultimately, in any business, in property as well, you are going to be responsible for your own decisions, and you need to be able to make those decisions in a position of knowledge and responsibility, that you have taken in all these inputs, you've mulled them all over, you've tested them against what you think you know, and you've come up with your own version of what it means to you and what your view is
Yeah.
on it. And if you do that, that is by far, far, far the healthiest way to learn and grow.
Yeah, and I'm a big advocate of positivity and surrounding yourself with positive people. And we're not saying don't do that, but there is a place for balanced viewpoints and actually highlighting the negatives or
Yeah,
the
robust debate,
disadvantages.
it's called.
Yeah,
Robust debate.
yeah, but it's called due diligence. You can't just be all rosy and think that the world is a great place and we're just going to stay positive. We're just going to focus on all the positives of this deal, and then go and buy our course that's just only positive. I think authentic education has all the negatives in it, and if anything, it's got all the negatives and less of the positives. And you've got to, like you say,
Yeah, and that actually makes it more positive
it makes it more
because you're
positive.
being pointed out where the pitfalls are,
Yeah,
and you're aware of them. So it's really healthy to to interact with other people that have a different view to you.
yeah,
And
I agree.
it's called robust debate. It's not personal. It's not, people. When I've asked a very simple and legitimate question of a property mentor online, their reaction has been hostility towards me. Due diligence is not a personal process.
No,
Nobody should have an issue with due diligence.
no, I
It's
completely
just
agree.
not a personal
And
process. You just put,
how would you do due diligence on a property mentor or a guru or someone giving any form of property education, training, mentorships, courses, even books? What would you advise people look out for, and how would they do that research?
well, I've got a whole two threads about it on Property Tribes, and they go into a lot of depth. So
Okay,
obvious points of call are
give me the
Company's
30-second
House,
summary.
Company's House, due deal. People that are claiming to be very successful and wealthy will be seen with others of the same level. They will be asked for commentary in newspapers. They will be a go-to person if the media need a comment on a particular issue, this kind of thing. So you want to have been in it for about sort of 10 minutes, 10, not 10 minutes. You want to have been in, they need to have been in it for about 10 years. You want to see that they've got substantial assets on Company's House. You want to see independent reviews of them, not just reviews cultivated and hosted on their own Facebook pages and websites. You know, Facebook actually is absolutely the Wild West of all of this. It's such a dangerous place.
Yeah.
I don't go on it very much myself because I actually think it's for mates talking to each other. It's not really for professional people
No, I
to be
agree.
talking.
And even if you are
But
authentic, it's difficult to come across authentic on Facebook because there's so many inauthentic people selling stuff on there. It's hard to differentiate yourself anyway. So I think
well, quite, yes, it really is the Wild West. But unfortunately, that and also YouTube becoming much more prominent in attracting newbies in. And we know from our own YouTube channel, which has topped over 1 million views now, that we get a very, very different audience on YouTube to what we get actually on propertytribes.com.
Okay.
And it's very interesting to see.
What are you seeing? What's the difference?
Sorry?
What's the difference? What are you seeing between the audiences? How would you describe them? Just more wealth creation on sort of Facebook and YouTube, or?
Yeah, oh, definitely, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Definitely.
interesting. I'll watch out
I mean,
for
we
that.
put a video up yesterday with Shaf Russell and a multi-millionaire, genuine multi-millionaire friend of his. They've been talking about lease options and rent to rent being actually dangerous strategies. In fact, they say they're not even a strategy. You can't even call them that. And you know, in the comments, there's been a lot of hostility towards that. Whereas on Property Tribes, our audience agrees that obviously rent to rent and lease options are fraught with difficulties,
Absolutely.
and you know, they're a control strategy, so you can't build a sustainable business just getting control of somebody else's asset when they could take it back at any time.
Yep.
So, you know, again, there's so many nuances to all of this, and we try and tease them out on our discussions. And nobody's dictating that you shouldn't do these things. Whatever you do is entirely your decision, and that is respected. But if you do decide to do these things, then at least go in with your eyes open.
Definitely. I mean, it's really good you mentioned lease options and rent to rent. They get, you know, a bit of a knocking, and you know, for good reason, as you say. It's almost a management strategy. It's certainly not an ownership strategy, not unless you can get that option to buy it, in which case it can be a good strategy if the landlord is on board, you're fully compliant with all the regulations. If you're going to manage it more intensively than the landlord, there's, you know, likely some fairly big costs there. Upgrading the property, certainly from a safety point of view, all the fire safety and all, you know, HMO licensing if you're doing HMO route, can be quite costly. So it's understanding those costs, and you know, I think the value, like you say, the valid strategies for various people if they know what they're getting into. That's
and I
key,
think, Nick, what I object most to is the way these strategies, I'm not even going to call them strategies anymore, the way they're marketed.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, Rick Otten, who was the most lauded trainer in the UK for lease options, he received the biggest corporate fine in Australian history for what the court called deceptive marketing.
Wow.
The way that that lease options were marketed to consumers. He received an $18 million Australian dollar fine, which is equivalent to about 12 million sterling.
Crikey.
Now, as a result of that fine, he was made bankrupt because he couldn't pay it. And when all his assets were examined, he hadn't done a single lease option himself.
Really? Wow. I didn't know that story. That's unbelievable.
Same for Ben Rogers.
Wow.
He'd done about 5 or 6, but none of them had completed. And of course, what this is telling us is that it's actually more lucrative to teach these strategies or these methods than it is to do them yourself. And if you really could buy property no money down, as there's various online seminars happening online around the place at the moment, if you really could buy property no money down, wouldn't you be doing that 24/7?
Yeah.
Why would you be running a webinar on it?
Everyone
Just
would,
think about it.
Well, plenty of people are running the webinars on them.
Oh God, yeah.
I think the no money down phrase is just it's a throwback to pre-2008. You know, when I was in property then with Inside Track, one of the biggest trainers at the time. I don't know if you remember them. I'm sure you do. They were doing these
Yep.
seminars and massive upsells, selling you below market value properties where you'd immediately sign a self-certified mortgage to use that 15% discount as your deposit and refinance the next day for no money down. And that did exist. It doesn't exist now.
Well, it did in the Mortgage Express
Yeah.
product, where you had your what was
Same
called a
day.
daylight remortgage, and that was a legitimate
It was.
product up until April 2008,
Mm.
as you say. And indeed, I've done 3 of those MX deals in between 2005 2008. So there was a legitimate
Yeah,
way to do it.
there is.
But it disappeared in April 2008. Then we had the obviously the massive financial crash, and well, we're over a decade on from that, but people are still talking about
Mm.
it. So, and you mentioned Inside Track. Well, of course, it's well known that Nick and myself briefly worked with Inside Track on the educational
Of
side. We
course.
never ever sold a single property, but we did work on the educational side. And thanks to that education, we didn't join their club, as it were, that you had to pay to join. We just took the education and we went off and built our portfolio from there. But while we were working for them, we did see how these slick marketing funnels were set up, and then we saw that the good times were obviously not going to last, and we started to get concerned, and that's when we left. So
Definitely.
we do know what goes on within these marketing funnels, and I think that's actually helpful that we have those insights.
Yeah, really useful, really useful. And if you want to know all the pitfalls of lease options and rent to rent, it's all in there. You won't get any marketing funnels in there. You'll just get the truth. That's why, again, I just wanted to put it all down in writing, Vanessa, because it's all up in my head. I've done a few rent to rent deals. Rent to rent deals can work, and they've got a place. If you know what you're doing, you know what you're getting yourself into, you've got the right deal, the right landlord, the right area, the right demand, and you do it for the right time, and it's a stepping stone maybe into a career. And I used it from a few deals early on in my career to get some cash flow. It worked great. I was bringing in £500-600 profit, per property, and I did a handful. So I'm no rent to rent guru, but I did a handful, enough to understand it and see the pitfalls and learn from it and move on from it. So I would say if you've got no money, if you've got a very small amount of money, don't rule it out, but make sure you read this book, do a heck of a lot of research on it, because it will be tricky times. And, in particular now, harping back to COVID, it's even harder, because if you're losing those couple of tenants, that's your profit margin, you're then defaulting to the landlord, and the landlord will be, forced to not take as much rent from you, even though you've offered them this great lease option or this great rent to rent deal. So I think,
yeah, and that's where landlords, I was talking about the 2 different sides of the sector, that's where landlords suffer because of these rent to rent arrangements that go wrong. And if you do look on the Facebook guru groups, there are literally swarms of people saying, particularly in the rent to rent serviced accommodation sector, saying all my bookings have gone, can't afford to pay the landlord, what shall I do? I've just posted the keys back to him. These people are offering guaranteed rent, but they set up the company 3 weeks ago after coming off a Samuel Leeds course. They're not in a position to guarantee the rent.
no.
So then, landlords have the most horrendous public image. We are, public enemy number 1. And, all these gurus driving around in their flashy cars and big houses and everything, they don't do any of us any favors whatsoever. They give tenants the wrong impression that we're all rolling in it. And obviously, we don't want that, because it's not true. The margins in property are fairly slim, even at the best of times, and getting harder and harder because of the obviously Section 24, increasing compliance costs, etc, etc, etc. So when things go wrong in the kind of rent to rent or lease options, it's actually genuine landlords that end up carrying the can.
I agree.
And that is again why You know, we do have awareness about this on Property Tribes. Many of our landlords come on and say, oh, I've been receiving these endless letters in coloured
Yeah, I've
envelopes
received,
trying
I
to get
think,
property off
20 to
me.
30 letters in the last 12 months from rent-to-rent operators in Reading alone.
Wow, there you go then.
So it's shocking, unbelievable.
Shows how prolific it
Yeah,
is.
and it's tempting. You know, when you're a landlord, it's tempting to look at these guys. Even I get tempted. Like, you know, I'm like, I don't get tempted. I look at it going, that's so tempting. You know, like, we'll pay you full rent. We will manage your property for you. It's completely hands off. You know, we're this great management company. We've been doing this for years and years and years. And, you know, it's signed by, you know, literally Joe Bloggs. And who is Joe Bloggs? You look into them and they've not done much necessarily. You know, again, I'm not being unfair to all rent-to-rent operators because that's not the case. And if you are
No, there's some good ones out
yeah,
there.
absolutely,
There's
some really
people
good
that do it on
ones.
a professional level, that do have cash reserves, that can pay the rent if they don't have occupancy, and you know, good for them. If there's good ethical people out there doing it, well, I'll salute you. And ditto lease options, but lease options I think are not good for residential because it falls into the realm of residential lending, which is a regulated activity because it's vendor finance. Um, by all means, crack on with them on commercial property. Yay,
Yeah,
brilliant.
doing one this
But they're
week actually.
not for residential.
Doing a great one this week. Really, really good on commercial property. My wife runs a salon chain, and she's furloughed all her staff. She's shut down at the moment, obviously. Can't wait to get back to work. But there's another salon chain locally that's gone bust. I won't go into too much detail, but we're looking to acquire one of their buildings, working with their current landlord, who's super happy to see another tenant come up straight away within, you know, a couple of weeks of them defaulting and going into liquidation. And we've got some great terms on that. We've got a few months rent-free period. We've got a lease option from, I think, years 2 to 5, so we can purchase it. There's a valuation already from their current portfolio valuation, so we know roughly what they want for it. So absolutely cracking deal in commercial. And what we'll do with that, we'll probably convert the top floor to residential and keep the bottom as the salon. Create a nice little mixed-use scheme, which will, you know, the residential will then fund the rent on the salon. So we'll have a rent-free building for the salon. So there are absolutely some cracking lease options out there. But yeah, bit of a minefield with residential. Can be done, but yeah, as you say, lots of regulation to be aware of, and it has to be structured very carefully. And again, you sort of fall into that area. You certainly don't want to fall into that area of, you know, working with vulnerable people that are desperate to get rid of their property. You know, that area of the market's tricky, and you've got to, you know, I'm a big believer in win-win situations. It's got to work really well for both parties, and if that's the case, business can be done, and it can be done well, and everyone can flourish. If it doesn't meet that criteria, I'm not interested in working with someone. So that'd be my overriding advice.
Yeah.
I think it's about time we move to a bit of a Q&A session, actually. Please keep those questions coming in. We've got a few questions here. Really appreciate that. Thank you to Craig. Thank you to David M, C London, Ed McGovern. Let's get onto some of these. Let's look at the comments here. We've got a holiday let question, actually, Vanessa. It's probably a good one to start with.
Okay.
What have we got? Oh no, a sort of a holiday let question here from Craig. He says, holiday lets aside, unless a property deal that looks mathematically a no-brainer, would you say not to make buying decisions with property deals right now? And if so, for how long? You know, how long would you wait? I think I touched upon this earlier, but what's your opinion of that? I guess it's case-by-case basis, isn't it? It depends how good the deal is. I'm doing this lease option this week. You know, it might not be here next month. So you've got to kind of weigh up how strong the opportunity is here, I guess, doesn't it? And where it is.
Well, hello, Craig. Thank you very much for your question and for joining us. It's a tough one. You know, I'm almost even loath to have an opinion because we're literally just coming out of lockdown now. The market's reopened. I think you are going to have to be buying at a very significant discount.
Or great terms.
Yeah. And also, as I mentioned earlier, perhaps looking at opportunities where you can add value through refurbishment or development, PD or whatever it might be. Sorry, Dylan's just reappeared again.
Let's say hi.
Here he is.
Wow.
So that's his
gorgeous
view on
colouring.
So you know, I just don't know. We are in uncharted waters.
Be careful
My
is the view,
personal
isn't it, as well? Be careful.
kind of approach is to consolidate what I've got and hang on to it, and just sit back. I wasn't in buying mode anyway before that, and I won't be going into buying mode for a long time. But that's just me. Um, it's so hard to say, as you say, Nick. It is on a case by case basis. It's how much cash buffer you've got. It's how secure your other streams of income are. Yeah,
Yeah, don't.
but try and get a deep
I think
discount.
that's a great bit of advice actually on the cash flow. I mean, that point alone is an overriding piece of advice I'm giving anyone at the moment when I'm mentoring them, because if you run out of cash, doesn't matter how many millions you've got on your balance sheet, in your properties, in your equity, if you go cash flow dry, you are bankrupt. And the liquidators can come in and take your properties away and sell them to get any creditor's money back, any bank's money back. So, cash is king. It's absolutely critical to, make sure that you are cash flow buoyant, create a bigger buffer than normal in these times, and treat that cash more carefully than normal before jumping in to buy the next deal, however good it is. So that's a good piece of advice. Thank you. We've got one here from Dorps. Must be a nickname, not sure. Right, Vanessa said, being held to rights now, Vanessa said, holiday lets will boom, but then she said that a lot of landlord portfolios would be under pressure. I assume that you meant non-holiday let landlord portfolios will come under pressure.
I did. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. I mean, clearly, as you yourself, Nick, alluded to earlier, it's actually quite healthy to have diversification in your portfolio to mitigate risk. When Nick and I started out in 2004, we just went for single occupancy buy to let, and we just built a solid portfolio of that first, and then we diversified into holiday lets. So I think it would be dangerous to have an entire portfolio of holiday lets if you don't have any other significant income, because the difference is obviously you are reliant on bookings, and with a standard buy to let, you're getting the rent at the beginning of every month. With holiday lets, obviously you're waiting on bookings to come in. So I think they are good going forwards. If you've got a solid portfolio of buy to lets, you may even have properties in your portfolio that are suited to holiday letting, perhaps in city centres, maybe, that you could maybe consider that in the future, provided, of course, it's unencumbered, or you can get the correct holiday let finance on it. So yeah, you're right on that point. You wouldn't it wouldn't be a good idea to have an entire portfolio of holiday lets, even in the good times.
You just touched on a point that's worth mentioning, and trying to give good tips on these webinars. So if I see a point, I'm going to jump on it. And the point there was getting the right finance on holiday lets. Specifically, people that have portfolios already in town centres where it's a good demand for normal tenants and professional tenants, but actually could be great for Airbnb and holiday let, short-term let use. And there's some critical problems with, again, this kind of wealth creation industry touting serviced accommodation and this kind of short-term let stuff as the next thing to quadruple your rental income and turn your existing portfolio into 4 times the amount of income. And critically, there are 2 major issues with that. One is the finance; you might not be allowed to do it. And 2, probably most importantly, is the planning. You're not allowed to just turn your flat in London into a full-time Airbnb. It's against the planning rules.
Well, certainly not if it's leasehold. There will almost certainly be a caveat in the lease prohibiting that kind of activity.
Against the lease.
Obviously, it's much more of an issue in London, where they have the 90-day rule.
Yeah.
I think the short-term lets industry is different to the holiday lets industry because it mainly catered to people coming from abroad, and obviously we are going to see a massive disruption to the aviation industry and the numbers of people coming into this country. And there's talk of a 14-day quarantine.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to come to this country if they have to quarantine for 14 days.
I think that's in place, isn't it?
So,
I think I heard that was in place, actually. I think that's actually in place, that 14-day quarantine.
Okay, yes, it could well be. I wasn't sure, so I didn't like to say.
Certainly is in other countries
clearly,
already.
This is why Brits are going to holiday at home, because they're not going to be wanting to travel on aeroplanes where there might be COVID people
in
the aeroplane for hours on a time. and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, again, it points back to this resurgence in the Great British holiday. I can't see people traveling abroad. You know, I think the cruise industry is going to, you know, really suffer as well. You know, cruise ships are like a petri dish.
Yeah.
And I love cruising. I go on a cruise every year,
Okay, wow.
but I won't be for a while. And in fact, on our last cruise, Nick got the most terrible pneumonia, and he was ill for about 3 weeks. So yeah, that it shows that people are going to be very, very mindful of the environments that they go into going forwards.
Yeah, I agree.
Cleanliness is going to be a big thing as well.
We're
Holiday lets, your holiday let has to be that nobody has ever stayed there before, that there's no evidence that another human being has been in there.
No wet dogs
That's
on the
how clean it
sofa
have to be.
sort of scenario, you know. Yeah, that person, Dorb says, thank you, Vanessa. They've got several buy-to-lets, but no holiday lets. Assume you should outsource management of holiday lets to an agent. But you do that, don't you? So
yes, and obviously, you know, same rules apply. Do due diligence on the agent. We're very fortunate with our holiday let at Canberra, for instance, the agent lives on site. So they're very invested in the whole development. They can pop round, you know, in 30 seconds if there's an issue for a guest, and they do an absolutely cracking job. They really do. And some people say, oh, you know, holiday lets much harder to manage and so on. But you know, if you get the right management company, same as with using the you know, the right letting agent, they can be as hands off as you want. And the other thing to remember about holiday lets is if you start getting bills, it's good you've had a guest.
Okay,
So
yeah.
when they're empty, you're literally only
bills.
paying for your you know, your mortgage if you have one, council tax, standing utilities, you know, insurance, basic costs. So when they're empty, you know, they're not costing you a prohibitive amount. Obviously, when you get guests, then you start to get bills for cleaning, welcome packs, and all that kind of good stuff. So I get excited when I get bills because I know that I've had guests.
Good. Yeah, no, it's a nice sign. I've got a question here from the same person. I do apologise. These are coming in as they, so you can see that if people are posting comments and questions now, they're going to get answered immediately. I will scroll back up the list shortly and look at some of these others for sure. Dorps, thank you for your continued involvement. We really appreciate it, and we will definitely work hard to answer your questions. So commercial properties, yes. So can you comment on commercial properties and what are your views around purchase prices and tenant demand going forward? And yeah, interesting. If you don't mind me starting off with this one, Vanessa, a lot of our development business is dealing with commercial to residential conversions. That's a lot of our development work. We like to start off with bricks and mortar in the first place. I feel that's often safer and reconfiguring and changing the use of a property than necessarily building it from scratch. You know, building it from scratch has got, you know, it can be easier in terms of physical building in many ways, but it can also be tricky to get deals that stack up and work. So, but in terms of, sort of general commercial properties, I think, you know, my opinion is, and we touched upon it earlier, a lot of high streets are going to be potentially decimated. A lot of empty tenants. We could see a lot of offices as well on the edges of high streets becoming vacant, and ultimately there's going to be a lot of people that change. You know, if they haven't gone bankrupt and liquidated, they might be changing the way they work. They might be, you know, doing online seminars and dealing with clients and stuff. And you know, I had a call this morning with our accountants. You know, and they were doing a Skype call with me, you know, a Zoom call. Sorry, actually, same thing. You know, two good platforms out there. Not particularly pitching one or the other. I'm not getting paid by Skype or Zoom, unfortunately. But ultimately, you know, all this stuff will change. This will change. I will not go into London for a meeting now. Absolutely no point in going, you know, a 3-hour round trip from Reading to London for a meeting that's a half an hour long meeting that I could have on Zoom, or I can dial in on Zoom. So that will change the demand of these places. So that will change the pricing, obviously. I think we are going to see rent reductions on the high street. You know, if you go into malls and things like that, the prices of the rents are eye-watering. I don't know how half of these shops do business with the extortionate rents that these town centre you know, malls are charging. And, you know, from the salon business that we run, you know, it's looking at those rents compared to just, you know, 100 meters down the road on the fringes of the sort of malls where the rents are normal, sensible levels. So I think we'll see a correction in rents on commercial properties. I wouldn't be advising anyone personally, my personal advice, wouldn't be advising anyone to go and buy a commercial investment at this particular moment, unless you've got extremely good terms on it or an existing very, very good tenant, unless it's a tenanted investment. I wouldn't be buying a vacant investment with no tenant on the hope that you're going to find a tenant. I think finding the tenant, a commercial tenant, can be extremely difficult. Not impossible, but extremely difficult. But there, of course, on the positives, we focused on a few negatives today, on the negative side of education and the negative side of COVID, but hopefully we've given some positive tips and positive advice to do on those. And the positive side of things coming out of this is, I think there will be some good opportunities in property now, and I think there will be lots more stock coming onto the market from, there's always a sad side to the story, but restaurants, shops, offices going bankrupt, changing in working habits, working from home. Who knows what's going to happen to the care home sector? We know that that's been hit really hard by COVID-19 deaths. So will that have a major impact on occupancy in care homes, and thus a number of care homes will be getting sold off in groups, in larger groups? So, horrible situation causing this, but on the plus side, as investors, there's going to be possibly stock coming to the market that we can look to acquire and, hopefully create a win-win situation for the person that's stuck with that stock with no tenant maybe. Give them a solution to the problem by coming in and maybe converting it and doing a deal for them. So, what's your opinion on commercial property? I own very little commercial property with commercial tenants in. I don't believe you own any, do you, Vanessa? But what's your opinion? What are you hearing?
I don't own any commercial property, and I don't feel appropriate to comment really, because I have no direct experience of it. My area of expertise is just single occupancy, buy-to-let and holiday lets. That has suited me in our property ambitions, the reasons why we started in property 50, so how long ago was it now? 18 years ago. See, I keep having to remind myself, it's gone so quickly.
Same amount, I think, 18, 20 years.
So I'm very risk averse. I'm very conservative with a small c, in the respect of I stick to bread and butter, solid, reliable, good quality properties, and it served me well. So I hope it will continue to do so.
Yep.
But as I said, we're in such uncertain times that nobody really knows.
It's tricky, isn't it? Good question here, actually. Do you, being in holiday lets yourself, are there any specific courses on holiday lets that you can recommend?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm not sure that I know of any. I have written a guide on Property Tribes to sourcing, setting up and managing a holiday let. And it's quite extensive.
Okay, if you could post a link to that afterwards. I know Kelly, our marketing head of marketing.
I need to write these links down, but I can provide all these links, or you can, it's very easy to find content on Property Tribes because it's all curated into the different tribes. So you can just use the drawer in the top to drop down. All the tribes are there. You'll see the Holiday Lets tribe. Just go and have a rummage through there. There's tons of stuff in there.
Excellent, thank you.
So no, I'm not aware of a course. I think the big agencies that are out there are very useful resources, like cottages.com and so on. They provide a lot of educational resources.
Yeah.
You can ring them up and ask them, about occupancy levels and stuff like that. So they sometimes actually put on kind of educational evenings and things. I've been to a few of those. Okay,
that's really good to know. I've actually got a chapter in my book as well, chapter 16, providing vacation rentals at home or abroad. So that's a good one. Tried to cover as much as I can there with my limited knowledge and a lot of research. The bits that I don't know about in this book that I haven't done myself, I've done a lot of research on. And to be honest, I have done most of the strategies in there at some point. I've done a couple of vacation rentals. And I've done sort of 20 serviced accommodation units. So it's small scale stuff by some people's comparison, but enough to learn it and to either not do it any further or build up on it further. So everyone's different and what they suit and what they like, of course. We talked about passion and people, and it's a people business early on in the chat. And you've got to do what you like, what you enjoy, and what you find, day to day is worth doing for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I totally subscribe to that, Nick. It's you know, particularly with holiday lets, it's very, very rewarding when you get such lovely comments and reviews
Mm,
from people, because people, you know, holidays are so important to them. They look forward to them for you know,
yeah,
all
yeah.
year. And
Big
scientists have
responsibility.
discovered a very interesting phenomenon called anticipation happiness.
Okay.
And they found that people are in a higher state of happiness anticipating something that they're going to
Oh wow.
do,
Okay.
that they're looking forward to, than when they're actually doing it. And this, you know, holiday lets fall into that because people are looking forward to them. And it's so important that we as holiday let owners provide the optimum environment for them to have a truly
Mm,
wonderful holiday and to create some really, really happy memories. And when we looked in at Camber Sands, I didn't know Camber Sands from Adam. I'll tell you that now. I'd never even heard of it. And I saw a picture of a development with all these weatherboarded houses. And I just wanted to be there. And I said to Nick, look, we got to go and look into this. This looks like holiday let territory. So we could see straight away that it was within in a 2 hour drive from London. And we did what I call try before you buy. So we went down to Camber for the weekend and we rented one of the existing holiday lets there. And we were welcomed by the owner, who'd brought us some lovely fresh tiger bread and some milk and some tea. And, you know, it was so lovely from the moment we walked in. And, you know, we'd spent the whole weekend, you know, discovering the area, because if you don't like the area yourself and you don't feel that it's a
mm,
good place to spend time, then how are you going to communicate to your guests all the great things they can do on their holiday? So we absolutely loved Camber. We loved the beach. It was absolutely stunning. It's 7 miles of golden sand,
wow.
shallow waters, great for
Where
families.
is it in the country?
And then you've got,
I'm not familiar. Where is this in the
sorry,
country? I'm not. I've never been there.
it's East Sussex coast near Rye.
Okay.
It's about 4 miles from the beautiful town of Rye, which is a medieval
Okay.
town. It's in the 1066 historic area. So you've got all your 1066, you know, exhibits and things to
Oh
go and
wow.
look
Okay.
at. There's so much to do in the area. I think there's 40 golf courses in a 20-mile radius. It's got Rye Links Golf Course, which is one of the most famous golf clubs in the world. It attracts kiteboarders in the winter, so you get winter occupancy. And what's interesting is that a lot of films and advertising are filmed there. So I've had actual film crews and actors and whatnot staying
Wow.
as well. So, you know, that we saw all of that before we purchased it. We spent a 3 day weekend there, had a fantastic time. And this will make you laugh, actually. It was a new development. There was two 2-bed houses coming to fruition.
Okay.
One was white cladded and one was cladded in blue, which is my favorite color. And I said to Nick, oh, I want the blue one. And he said, well, look, it is £5,000 more. And I said, I think it's worth that, because you know, it's going to really jump out in the
Yeah.
photos. Everybody's going to want to stay in a little blue house. Of course, I did negotiate a discount, but I went for the blue one. And it's,
And it
you
works.
know, it's fantastic how it jumps out in the photographs at
Cool.
you. And of course, visual is so important
Definitely.
because people buy a holiday with their eyes.
Yeah, and that's the quintessential. I'm imagining this picture now in my head. It's this quintessential beach where you've got, you know, the little huts on the beach, and you think of those, you
Yeah.
know, blue, yellow, green, bright colours, the bright colours of umbrellas and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
amazing, and it would have cost you at least a couple of grand to paint it. So go for the one that's the right colour in the first place.
Well, indeed. And it's actually concrete weatherboarding. So it's
Ah,
indestructible.
okay.
It's not affected by the salty air. And once a year, we just have it, you know, sprayed down with a high pressure water
Hmm.
sprayer. And it comes back looking like
Well, good.
new.
Also, some really good tips there, which we haven't mentioned previously in this chat. When you're looking for a holiday home, look for something that potentially has got uses all season round. You don't just want something that's very
Oh,
seasonal.
definitely.
Massive point.
100%. People say, oh, well, you know, I'm going to buy somewhere in Cornwall. Well, let me tell you, Cornwall is incredibly seasonal, and it takes 5 to 6 hours to get there from the,
Yeah,
you know,
it's tough.
big density towns in the southeast. Nobody is going to be too likely to go for a long weekend to Cornwall if they've got to drive 5 hours on a Friday evening. So Cornwall, you will do extremely well, sort of May, June, July, August into September, bank holidays, half term, Christmas, New Year. But the rest of the time it's dead. So this is why we favour these areas in the southeast where our holiday
I
lets
think
are.
that's really good advice. It doesn't rule out places like Cornwall. It just means you've got to make your hay when the sun shines, literally, and you've got to factor that into your numbers. You know.
Yeah, and you've got to have a really, top-notch proposition.
Definitely. A couple of questions from earlier on in the chat. HD Consultants, thank you for that. It's just a point rather than a question, actually. They said about the mortgage deferments, they're saying the banks won't have to ask because they'll see it on your bank statements and they see gaps in your payments. So that's a good point.
Ah, good point.
Very good point. Didn't think of that one, did we? Damn. Can I give it back? No, I'm happy with my decision. Right, okay, Mr. MDL, I mean, this is an age-old question, but what now is the best way to buy, flip and renovate properties? It's a very general question. Same as ever, really, but just be ultra cautious.
I wouldn't be doing it in this. You're in a falling market.
Don't catch a falling knife, John Howard likes to say.
So now is a good time to buy if you're going to refurb and hold.
Yeah.
Good time to buy, but you're a very brave person if you think you can do a flip in a falling market. You could end up with a property that's you spent money on that hangs around on the market for eons. And if you've got finance on it, bridging finance, it's going to chew into your profit big time. And you may not be able to sell it at a price that even makes money for you. So you're going to end up renting it out in the end anyway. So, buy, refurbish and sell is a completely different game to buy and hold. It's like trying to compare an apple to an orange. There's no comparison.
No. Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that. What have we got here? Question-wise, we've got, I'll bring this sum up on screen and I'm scrolling through. How do you balance, this is a good question, how do you balance from TomTom, how do you balance being compassionate to a tenant situation with not being taken advantage of? Yeah.
That is a good question. And I think your first response is empathy. And you see if the tenant is willing to work with you. For me, communication in these kind of situations is absolutely pivotal to how they're going to end up. If the tenant is regularly communicating and being proactive in working with you, then that's a very good sign. Soon as tenants go quiet and stop responding, that's when you've got a problem, generally speaking, and even more so now. So we have to do everything we can do to keep the dialogue open and continuing. And if they, if you've made some concessions and you've tried to help, and you feel that boundaries are being pushed further and further, that's the time where you need to start asking questions about their financial situation. Are they self-employed? Have they got access to self-employed support schemes? Are they on furlough? Have they been made redundant? Do they need help getting registering for universal credit or LHA? It's a tricky one, and this is why go back to when we started this whole talk. It's those people that have nurtured relationships that will come out of this largely unscathed compared to people that haven't. You can only judge each situation on its individual merits, but what I would say is that when people are in a very, very stressed state, they can behave erratically. And I think we all have to make, we have to have forbearance with that, because everybody's under a lot of stress. We don't know whether the tenant has, suffered a bereavement or what's happened to them. So it's a tricky one. It's important to be empathetic, but to have firm boundaries. I mean, for instance, in my case, when my tenant said that they couldn't pay the rent at all during lockdown, I presented them with my payment option of 50%, and I said, but this is given on conditions as follows. Number one, you make the payment on the correct day. Number two, you maintain open communication with my agent, Vicky, and that you respond to her at all times. And number three, that you understand that if you do not stick to my conditions, this offers will be removed. So I did put down a few boundaries of,
Okay.
I'm making this offer on these
Excellent.
conditions. And they've accepted that. So I will have to see if the payment comes in. Actually, I think it's due tomorrow for the second 50%. But again, it's really down to your individual perception of the tenant. If they've been good in the past, it's likely that they are being, they are a reasonable person, and trying to get a handle on their actual true situation, because most people will have some form of access to financial support, certainly for the first few months, even family and friends. So this is why I fear that there will be a lot more fallout in the months ahead as this all starts to come out in the wash.
Yeah, no, I do agree, and I think not, allowing tenants to have their knee-jerk reaction and for you then to communicate to them and give them time to come round to the real situation is critical, isn't it? That's that communication comes in. I've just posted a link to your template letter to tenants, possibly not that specific issue you've just been describing there, but your general one that you mentioned on Property Tribes, that's up on screen now. So head over there to Property Tribes and have that letter. Hopefully that'll be of use to some landlords. It's in the armoury if you need it in the coming months.
Sorry, Nick, I was just going to say, what's so great about, forums like yours, like Property Tribes, like Property 118, like the other Facebook group, the ethical Facebook groups out there, is that you get this hive mind of knowledge coming in. So we've presented that template letter, and then all our community have gone on underneath it saying, well, I've done this and I did that and this helped me, and maybe try that. So you get this hive mind of knowledge of real-time information coming in of how people are dealing with these very challenging situations.
And hearing all the tips. I think it's vital more than ever to be listening and reading the forums and being there in the industry, listening, not burying your head in the sand, hoping your rents are going to come at the end of the month. Get out there and see what everyone else is doing and seeing what their reaction is. I've got a funny anecdotal story for you, actually, from one of our tenants who incidentally paid his rent on time, but a week before that, he had his panic reaction. I'll go into a few specifics, but ultimately he owned, I think, a chip shop, local chip shop. And they were shut down for about a month or maybe less than that. But we subsequently found out that he was able to open very quickly and they were absolutely booming because everyone was going for their fish and chip takeaways at social distancing. And I think he had 3. So he was having the time of his life and was still asking for a rent reduction. So that was an interesting tenant. So yeah, your knee-jerk reaction certainly can't be instant, yes, okay, what do you need? It's a case of, well, we can be flexible if the situation demands, but can you tell us a bit more about your situation, how you're being affected and why, and let's work through it together, but let's have a chat. It's not an immediate, no, there's a blank check, you can have your rent off. I think there are people that will think that's what's going to happen and doesn't, and you need to weed out the wheat from the chaff, really, don't you? People that need it.
Well, I think in any, I said this right at the beginning, in any situation, you're going to see the very best of people and the very worst of people in these crisis situations. And we sure are seeing that. It's that it will be the minority that seek to profit from this chaos.
Definitely. Getting a leg up on those less fortunate.
They got to sleep at night. So
definitely.
I got into property myself to actually provide a good service and to go and have a good night's sleep. I didn't get into it to not be able to sleep at night because my conscience wasn't clear.
Definitely. Needs to be win-win. Lisa Popat has asked, how can I arrange viewings for my HMO and undertake them? It's probably one for me, that, isn't it? Well, social distancing is critical. We are finding actually, there's been a couple of complaints internal to HMOs where other tenants have brought in a guest. We've had a couple of people bringing guests,
Yeah, that is
against
an
the
issue.
rules. That's an issue. So we've had complaints. So we've had to give formal warnings, written warnings to those tenants that have been bringing in guests into the property, potentially putting other people at risk. But in terms of doing viewings, I actually asked on one HMO, one of the existing tenants who we have, we try and do a house rep in our HMOs. We give them a small rent reduction, so they kind of help out with being a bit more proactive, reporting problems. If they see issues, that they will make more of an effort to tell us about it. You'd be surprised how many tenants are happy to sit on problems for months, or a drip coming through the ceiling, or a stain, and not tell you about it until the ceiling caves in, and it doesn't coincide with your monthly or bi-monthly visit. So we like to encourage tenants to report problems because we want to fix them. So, in this situation, she actually did a walkthrough of the vacant room, which was already vacant. She did a walkthrough of the room showing that, and then did a walkthrough of all the communal areas, which was fantastic, all video recorded. I didn't even need to visit the property myself or my lettings manager. So that was one way we conducted viewings, obviously virtual viewings. People are talking about these and doing them.
Yep.
It's useful if you have a house rep, because that house rep potentially could show someone round, not introducing two people into their house, like, a letting agent and a new client.
Yep.
They can actually do the viewing and keep it social distancing and keep the risk as minimal as possible. We always ask people to stay in their rooms, so we message them beforehand or WhatsApp them, the whole group, and make sure everyone's locked in their rooms, and that it's just the communal areas and the room in question that's shown. We've had scenarios on a site that's just finishing, which we just started doing viewings on, where it's actually vacant. And what we'll do is our lettings manager will unlock the door, the property, and say, it's on the second floor, flat 5, go and have a look for yourself and come out when you're ready. So there's all sorts of ways you can do the viewings. I think some tenants in HMOs are going to be more sensitive than others, and it's about respecting those people and explaining what you're doing to ensure you're not putting them at risk. Obviously, if you want to go to extremes of using face masks and gloves and this kind of stuff, I'd urge you to look into the rules around that before you assume that's the best thing to do. There have been some, I'm indifferent about it. I don't wear them, but I'm washing my hands whenever I go out or touch anything, in and out, sanitizing. I don't wear a mask. But there are stories that gloves are particularly bad. People are walking around with gloves all day long, and actually they're infecting everything. And it's far better to actually sanitize and wash your hands after going into a public place or touching anything or transmitting. So gloves are, in some scenarios, causing more of an issue than they are good. So I guess make sure you have a policy, communicate that to the tenants, and carry out safe viewings. That'd be my advice. Have you got anything good, anything useful to add to that, Vanessa?
No, I think you've given some very good advice there. I just think that going forwards, that new cleaning and hygiene protocols might have to be written into house rules,
Yes, good idea. Yep.
and maybe added to tenancy agreements, to make these situations clear. And
Definitely.
I would be minded to provide hand sanitizer, maybe a laminated, notice on the wall, just reminding people that hygiene and whatnot's still going to be incredibly important going forwards, and that it's to everybody's benefit to adhere to it. And maybe obviously cleaners going in, maybe they have to be extra vigilant and start wiping down door handles and things as well. So I think we will see changes in cleaning activities within HMOs going forwards because of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think HMOs, because they are a more intensive use than a single buy-to-let, they're always
Yeah.
going to come under increased scrutiny, increased regulation. There's more than likely actually, things that will be added into the HMO licensing regulations that come out of this that
Possibly, yeah.
provide for these kind of situations. I'm sure that there will be improvements. And I'm always looking at life in a positive way, and whatever we can learn from this to improve on and act more responsibly, more safely. It's a very unfortunate thing that in this world we have to experience bad things to make improvements. And Grenfell was another recent disaster that's happened that had to cause change in the industry, and it did cause really positive change in the building
Yeah,
industry.
very
So
good point.
this will be
There
no
will be
different.
good things that come out of this. There will,
Absolutely.
undoubtedly. So, it's not all doom and gloom, but there's a long way to go. People need to change and adapt, and really
Improve.
be on top of their business, to move it forwards through this very, very, challenging times. Do you know, it's quite interesting. I quite often use a sailing analogy, um, in these kind of instances. I was reading up about the Fastnet race, which I think it was in the 70s. Is that right? 70s, Nick? Yes.
What? Sorry.
Fastnet.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
still, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's still going on, but there was one in the 70s where there was the most horrendous storm, and I think 16 sailors lost their lives that night in the storm. And what was really interesting was that the biggest survival rate was amongst the boats that heaved to. Now, heave to is a sailing term which means that you actually immobilize the boat on the surface of the water. You kind of almost park it. So you're not actually sailing, you're just in a static position.
Yeah, you're just going with the flow.
And you probably know about this, Nick, because I know that you enjoy sailing as well. And it's a wonderful thing to call upon in sailing. If you get into a very tricky situation, you just heave to, and you literally go into a kind of stasis. And that's kind of what I've done over the last few weeks of this coronavirus crisis. I've kind of heaved to. I've not tried to go backwards. I've not tried to go forwards. I've not tried to go sideways. I've not tried to make a run to a safe haven that I don't even know is a safe haven. I've just gone and heaved to, and I'm waiting for the storm and the waves and the wind to die down.
Literally. Dorps, the one from the question earlier says, thanks, Nicholas. So you're saying buying commercial properties to convert to residential is a possible area which might work going forward. People are selling education now, advocating buying it. Crikey, they're on that already, are they? Well, I do mentoring and I advocate it. So it's always been a valid strategy, commercial to residential conversions. It takes a lot of work. You're a property developer. You're talking about developing properties, and that is hard work. It's more hard work than sitting back and managing a portfolio or having a managing agent do it for you. So when you're doing commercial to residential conversions, there's all sorts of pitfalls. It is full property development, all the regulations and building control, sound test, planning risk. There's still planning risks, although it's permitted development. There are still 4 key areas under the permitted development that you need to look at, and those are highways, contamination, flooding, and acoustics. So you need to do reports on those. There is still a planning risk. You need to be careful of that. Parking can be an issue in town centres. I know certain town centres we operate in absolutely require the maximum parking allowance, whereas others don't want any parking because they're trying to have a car-free town centre. So there are risks. It's important you know what you're doing with any sort of conversion. Funny one here, actually, from Xiaoming Zhang. Sorry if I can't pronounce that properly. Some people like the risk of buying commercial properties without a tenant, they're saying. Oh, Dorps is saying that, actually. Again, thank you for being so contributing so much today. Very, very interesting comments there. Well, okay, there's a property education question, Vanessa. I'll let you take this one. Magdalena Opala, the environment is changing very quickly. Does property education need updating, and how often?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Yes, Magdalena, it's changing by the second. We are, as I've said, in a very, very fluid situation. We'll continue to be so. So many unknowns, a lot of confusion. It's very challenging times. I think, as we mentioned earlier, these marketing funnels of the property training companies very, very reliant on offline events, because they can get a group into a room and kind of whip them up into a frenzy and really, really build on that emotive feeling that breaks down barriers and gets a sale at the end of the day. Now, there's nothing wrong in that. That's marketing. That's how sales are made. Provided, of course, that you do deliver on the product that you've sold for £20,000 or whatever it might be. Clearly, in the current circumstances, property educators cannot hold offline events. They cannot get this big emotional swelling in the, uplifting in the room. And that's going to affect their sales conversion. So we've seen a whole rush of online seminars, some just appearing almost desperate to me. I'm sorry to say, just my opinion. And you know, almost I've seen some that I feel are trying to profit from this situation in a very blatant manner. Um, and let's not forget, people are suffering bereavement, they're suffering job losses, they're suffering, the ruination of their business and their life. And to be, saying, "Oh, now's your time to make your millions," I think, it's not good. Um, and of course, we're seeing all these no money down strategies coming to the fore, because there'll be people out there that are in desperate situations, that have lost their job or seeking a new way forwards. So property education, yes, it needs to become, it needs to raise its standards. There are people trying to do that, good people like Cyril and his property education accreditation scheme, PEAS. And yeah, they need to respond to the challenging conditions that we're all in, and whether they can actually respond to that and provide an authentic product, I'm not sure.
It's going to be tricky, isn't it? I mean, we with Property Summits, we did our online seminar recently, which you were kindly involved in, and doing lots of chatting for us on the comments, which we really appreciate. And also you helped us promote the event to a great degree, and filmed the first in-person one before we got shut down. We got one in-person event in, and it was great fun. And there was a really good response from it. I was really, really proud that we did what seemed to be a good job. So, doing it online, it's very different, isn't it? And I think there's so many people doing free education out there at the moment, to a point. You can only get so much from free education like this. We'll answer as many questions as we can, but getting it a bit more structured and with good group of people giving their advice. Property Summits, I think, delivers on a wider breadth of education on an online summit. And that first event was free. If we do any further events, they may be free or they may be very cheap. There'll be a fair price for what you're getting until we can revert to in-person events and be a bit more personal and hands-on with people and give more tailored advice. Then there needs to be a way to deliver this product in a win-win situation where it can be viable for businesses to deliver a product and get paid for doing that work, but actually giving really good value at the same time and making it viable for people to invest that money to get that value. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, how long this lockdown goes down, and if this kind of online education stays, and if it stays, in what kind of form.
Yes, it is going to be interesting. And I think that the property educators, they're going to have students and existing mentees who are struggling because of this situation, who have acquired properties that maybe don't stack up.
Yeah, because they're
They
young
should
in their
be
career.
providing support and education for those existing people, as well as trying to bring in new people at the top of the marketing funnel. So, there'll be a lot of people involved in the rent-to-rent serviced accommodation sector that have had their businesses absolutely decimated. So that strategy was being taught a matter of a few months ago, and now, of course, nobody's mentioning it. So, there needs to be some consideration for existing students and mentees who will be struggling. And there needs to be thought going forwards about providing authentic information relevant to this whole situation as it unfolds, and that means adapting very, very quickly.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more with that. Quick question from Mel Nash. That was an emailed in question before the event. When you do register for these events on Property Forum TV, please do ask a question in the emails. We will get to them. If we're running out of online questions, and we see Sarah King, thank you, is asking some questions now. We'll get to those in a moment. But certainly, when you register for these events, whack your questions in and we will get to them. We're not going to be live for hours and hours, and we're at the 2-hour mark now. So I'm conscious that we might be boring you. Vanessa and I do like to talk, so we will try and wrap this up in the next few minutes.
We're propertyaholics, aren't we?
I could talk for property all day. I mean, why wouldn't we want to talk about property all day? It's like my life, it's my passion. It's why I'm doing this at 5 o'clock on a Thursday in lockdown when most people are probably on their third gin and tonic in the garden on a sunny day. Right, what was the question? Right, we're waffling. Mel Nash, I have 3 holiday lets and our insurance company is wriggling out despite changing their wording at the beginning of May to mean that they aren't covering contagious diseases. What's your thoughts on that? I mean,
And
I've
yeah,
heard this
that's an
from a few
interesting
investors
one.
online on Property Forum as well, struggling with this.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't really have an answer to that. I just think you need to be very clear in your marketing and in your property that you are adhering to all the government guidelines and cleaning standards. You need to give your guests confidence that there's no COVID in your germs in your property, etc. Um, I think the insurance industry will adapt to this, and they will come back with different products. I think there will be a
Yeah,
price
it'll be
increase. We've
priced in,
all
won't it?
already seen guaranteed rent used to be about £100 a year. It's come back now, and it's now about £150 a year. So I think we'll see premiums increasing.
Yeah, absolutely. Already, I'm sure. Already, I'm sure. Someone says, Dorp Dorp says, thank you, Nick. You're not boring us. Appreciate that. We appreciate that. Very kind words. Right, we'll do a couple more questions and then we'll probably wrap up. I think, Vanessa. Let us get off to that first
Sure.
gin and tonic of the day. I know mine is going to be waiting for me. Sarah King, thank you for your questions today. I've noticed a few comments and stuff there, and I've tried to pop up a couple. But she's asking, what are our thoughts on online auctions popping up? So I guess auction houses doing online auctions, reverting to that way of doing things. I think it's great. What about you, Vanessa?
Yes, I think obviously the technology was already there, and there were online auction houses. I think this is a great example of how the COVID crisis may well change these kind of parts of the industry, irrevocably. Um, Certainly, I cannot see any large gatherings of people
No,
being allowed this year.
no, I agree.
So that means that big events are off, exhibitions are off, auctions are off, and we are going to be relying far more on these kind of technologies to reinvent the industry. And it's actually healthy, I think. And I think we will return perhaps in 2021 to actual physical auctions again. But we've got to make no mistake that COVID is going to have huge impact on where people can gather and how they can gather, and
Mm,
that's going to be for the rest of the year
yeah, and beyond. Yes,
and
it's going
beyond.
to be interesting, very interesting time.
Which is really upsetting because I had tickets to go and see the Pet Shop Boys and it was cancelled.
I had tickets for the Dutch Grand Prix, which was a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely, the first ever Dutch Grand Prix in however many years, 20 years or something. So yeah,
Oh,
it's
that was
terrible, isn't it?
disappointing.
Lots of this. I had a good summer planned, but that's life. That's the negative.
It is.
The positive. I've got a phrase which I'd like to share with people and share with you, Vanessa, if you've heard this one. But I like to say, I hear a lot of people say, why is this happening to me? I've got so much bad luck. Why are all these bad things always happening to me? And my life coach, who I worked with a number of years ago, who I still stay in contact with and speak to regularly, she said to me, why are things happening for you, not to you? You've got to ask the universe, the law of attraction, all that kind of positive mindset training. Why is this happening for me? So now, when I ingrained that phrase, why is it happening for me, not to me? I take a moment before complaining, and I think, why is this being gifted to me to learn from? How am I going to,
Yeah.
take away from this so that I can become more successful? I can be more, I can be happier. I can, deal with problems in the future differently. And I think that's a really strong fundamental part of mindset is having that reasoning, why is it happening for me, not to me? So hopefully that's of use to some people. It's ingrained in my mind, and it really does. It's amazing how you start to think, how can I turn this negative into a positive? Where's the silver lining in this cloud?
Mm.
And there will be silver
That's
linings
fantastic
for a lot of
advice. It
people.
really is. I mean, I totally subscribe to that. And, you know, also I think developing an attitude of gratitude,
Mm,
being grateful for all the wonderful things that we do have, like our health, if we
yeah,
haven't been affected by this. Um, like our family and friends, like a place to live. You know, we've got so much to be grateful for.
We do.
And humans just generally tend to look at the downside of things. But as you say, Nick, every thing that comes into your life you can perceive it to be an opportunity to learn and grow, and if you take it as that opportunity, it will serve you.
Yeah.
So develop that attitude of gratitude, I think. And one of my favorite sayings is, and it's very appropriate for property, is real problems can always be solved. It's only imagined ones that are insurmountable. So
I
today
like
you
that.
may have a real problem. It can be solved. There is an answer. There's perhaps somebody in your network that knows the answer or knows somebody else that might have the answer.
Yeah.
So Nick and I have taken this 6 weeks that we have just dealt in the present, not what's gone in the past, not what anxiety might be coming down the pipe in the future. We've just taken each day as it comes, been grateful that we haven't been affected by this too badly. Our health is good, and we've had problems. And we said, right, this problem has reared up. How are we going to address this problem? And we've just done it. And it gives you such peace in your mind if you you go through each day like that, because there's so much about what's going on in the world at the moment that we can't change, we can't influence. And I think one of the most difficult things for me personally is knowing what information to trust. What are the truthful sources of information about this COVID
Mm.
crisis? And you can really go round and round in circles into your head and go down into a rabbit hole if you let it. So I've had to say to myself, well, I'm only going to get my sources of information from these two places which I trust. I'm not going to go and look on Facebook about 5G conspiracy theories or whatever. I can't change it.
Yeah.
I can never find out if it's true, and it's only going to chew my brain. So yeah, just try and keep a peaceful mindset as well, I think, by just dealing at it's like each hurdle coming towards you. You can't jump all 20 hurdles. You can just jump the one hurdle at the time. Get over that one, take a breather, and then see what comes your way next.
I think that's fantastic advice. And what I love about doing these webinars and getting to see a different side to Vanessa on this one, you're known for being very, at times, very opinionated, and you're out there, you're banging the world to rights, and that, I love that. I really do love that, and it's honest feedback in many senses. And what I love about these webinars, we're getting to understand your mindset, and that mindset that you've just described. You're leading on from a peaceful mind, and I would describe that process of being mindful. Mindfulness is a known process. It leads on from meditation. I've got a whole mindset chapter in my book. Not a shameless plug, I promise. I promise it's not. But I believe, I'm like you, I'm super passionate about mindset, and to hear that you are too, and all the things you're doing, these are common traits. And I talk about it in all my talks. You heard it on the Property Summits talk, that I believe success can be taught. And some of these building blocks of peacefulness, mindfulness, meditation, the law of attraction, they are, if they're dealt with as a tool in your toolkit at the right time, they are hugely influential in making you successful. And more often than not, what drives success is the ability to overcome a problem. It's not that you're an absolute genius at something. It's that you carry on and you make it work, and you fix problems and you overcome them. And your point about the biggest problems are those that are imagined in your head, I forget the exact words you used, that is absolutely the biggest problems we have, because more than often they're solvable, and you're going to come out at the other end as flesh and blood, and you're still going to be here. So what state are you going to be in is entirely determined by your mind and your mindset and how you overcome any particular problem. So yeah, I'm really glad we're having this chat, because it's something that doesn't come across when we're all chatting in the media and on our platforms about education and property and problems and solutions and that kind of stuff, and people doing bad things and not doing good things and da 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 da. This is really a passionate bit of my career mindset. So thank you for sharing that insight. I've got more questions.
I am opinionated, Nick. I fully put my hands up. I
That's
am
why we
very
love you.
opinionated. But it's because I love property. I
Yeah.
love what it can do for you, and I want as many people as possible to have access to that. And in the social on the social web, you need people with strong opinions because they are conversation starters.
Yep.
They contribute to the learning bank. Now, the wonderful thing is that the truth doesn't care for anybody's opinion, not mine, not yours, not anybody watching here. So opinions are, everybody has one, and we have to respect that everybody out there has the intelligence to make up their own mind after taking on all these opinions. So I'm not dictating to anybody how they should run their business or what they should do. No, that's not my style. I'm just sharing my opinion, saying try it on, listen to this guy over here, he's been in the business 10 times longer than me. Listen to this lady over here, she's got 100 properties in the northeast. Try it all on, see what you like, what you don't like, build your own opinion. And that puts you in such a powerful position. You are so empowered when you can stand in the responsibility of making your own decisions with your own mind, not being influenced by other people. And certainly in property, you know, the best person to decide who and how your money's going to be spent is the person that you see in the mirror, not a third party saying, give me 50 grand for joint venture and I'll make you a millionaire. So it's really, really important to build your own knowledge and your own views on things. And you know, there's nothing wrong in disagreeing. As we said, it's the best way to learn, and you can change your view by taking on board somebody else that has a slightly different view to you. So robust debate is healthy.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. It's a shame we're missing a lot of the panel discussions, you know, that have gone on in the Excel and a lot of the property shows that were happening. And I guess a lot of that's going online, which is great. And this is one such kind of panel that wouldn't necessarily have come to fruition. You know, we're wanting to get a YouTube channel going for a while, and you know, it's important at this point to plug your YouTube channel, Vanessa, because that's a great YouTube channel and a wealth of good information. And we would, you know, aspire to have a channel as good as yours. So tell us a little bit about that. How's that been for you? You know, some great advice, things like this going online. Again, it's great to see people on video. It's a nice form of learning, isn't it?
It is. I think people consume information in different ways. Some people like to watch videos, some people like to listen to videos or podcasts, some people like to read, some people like graphical representations and images. So I think at Property Tribes we try and cater to all of those different ways of consuming information, and we're able to because of the format of the forum, and that you can embed video and text and screenshots and images and graphs and PDFs or whatever you want. So
Multimedia.
our YouTube, we've got over 11,500 subscribers now, and we've topped 1,100,000 views, and we've got over 1,000 videos on there. And some of it's really boring stuff, like how do I serve a Section 21 notice? And I don't expect that to be of any interest to anybody until that point
They
when,
need it.
oh, I need to serve a Section 21 notice and I'm not sure how to do it. So
Absolutely.
it's very niche information. But I have to say, Nick, something happened this week which was very gratifying. I did an interview with Bill Irvine of LHA and UC advocacy, and he's so knowledgeable on this topic. And we did a little 45-minute webinar about, you know, UC and LHA through a COVID-19 lens. And I sent it out on Twitter, and I copied in Neil Cooling, who is the Director General of the DWP. And to my amazement, I got a tweet back from him saying, thank you very much for sharing this, Vanessa, and to both you and Bill for acknowledging the hard work of the DWP staff. Really
Amazing. Oh, wow.
appreciate
Well
it.
done. That's
So
nice.
the Director General of the DWP saw one of our videos and sent
That's
me a
cool.
really supportive tweet. And funnily enough, I had a call from a lady in Greece earlier this week who had seen our video about Enfield Council's landlord scheme, where they're trying to get more landlords on board with their various different private sector schemes. And she rang from Greece saying, I've seen your video, how do I get in touch with Enfield Council? So it's really exciting when you see such positive outcomes
Yeah,
from video. And of course, video is a massive prime mover on the social web. So
really,
it's really good to create video content around all these niche topics, and then people can go on a learning journey and just consume it at their own rate and their own way. And that's really a healthy way to learn.
definitely, really, really good medium coming up, and good way to connect with people. Social media is changing rapidly. Who knows where we'll be in 10 years? Half these platforms might not even exist for all we know. So it's quite a funny one. I'm going to finish with one last question here from our biggest fan. Who, thank you, Dorps again. Last question for Nick, I think. My last question, Nick. Could be for both of us. We'll see. What does he say? Thank you again for all the questions, guys. For someone sitting on a very large cash fund, I assume residential property. I've just taken that off screen. Excuse me. Residential property will be a good thing in the long term if I buy now. Due diligence, research, etc. So, I mean, in my view, absolutely yes. There's no bad time to go into property. You might have said 3 months ago was a bad time, but not if you hold it for 10 years, so or 5 years. So it's all about the long-term view, isn't it, Vanessa? And I think what we've tried to say today is, education and the right form, authentic education. It's about doing your due diligence on people, doing your due diligence on properties. Don't catch a falling knife, as our good friend John Howard likes to say. It is potentially a falling market in the coming months. Keep an eye on that. If you're confident enough in the deal and you've done your due diligence, no reason you can't buy it now, but be wary. It's a tricky few months. No one knows what's going to happen. Finishing on the positives, it's a great market to be buying potentially at some point in that next few months. There are these great opportunities. There are conversions out there. There'll be distressed sellers that have a different situation, unfortunately. But for investors looking to pick up some good deals, hopefully there will be some good win-win situations out there where you can help people that need to move on or downsize, and you might be able to do some deals. So, and I think it's been great chatting to you about the mindset stuff. That's been, for me, the most rewarding part of the call. And I hope that's, imparted some different mindset techniques on people, and at a time where it is really tough on the mindset. I still have bad days.
Oh yeah.
Even now, even knowing all these tricks, but it's about getting to the good day or the good hour after, and going and having a meditate, or looking at your dream boards and re-inspiring yourself.
And don't be afraid to reach out. Don't suffer in silence thinking there's no support for you.
Absolutely.
Because there is. You've got the property forums, you've got Facebook groups. People pick up the phone to me when they're in a very desperate state, and I try and assist them and help them and guide them and send them to people that can help them. So
likewise,
there's no need in this really, really connected world that we're in to suffer in silence. And I do encourage anybody who's feeling distressed or struggling with their mental health to reach out.
Absolutely.
I really do. There's a lot of support out there for you, and
Yes.
I will always talk to people, and I get calls every week from people that are in a bad way, don't want to talk on the forum about it because they're embarrassed, or there's personal things they don't want to express. And I try and just chat to them. Sometimes it just helps to have somebody listening to you. So yeah, don't suffer in silence, and take advantage of this very connected world that we're living in, and reach out and see where you can help others. One of the best ways to feel better is to try and do something to help somebody else.
I completely agree. My door is open to anyone watching this that needs help and needs a bit of inspiration, or prepping up one day and needs to be put in the right path at that moment. Vanessa and I are both available.
100%.
Offline. So please contact us through any of the contact forms on the websites or emails. I'll pop my details up in a moment. I'll pop Vanessa's up now. Head to Property Tribes, and you can connect with her there, and obviously connect with all of her audience and try and get your questions answered there, whether it's on a mental health issue or a property issue. Feel free to reach out to any of us publicly or privately. But thank you very much for joining us, Vanessa. It's been a really nice show. We've covered all sorts of things. And actually, you know what? I didn't expect us to go on for so long. We're almost 2.5 hours. That's
Wow.
testament.
I thought it was an hour.
I thought we were going to do an hour or so, and it's like, why cut it short when we're enjoying ourselves? There's probably no one watching now. Hello to the 3 of you that are left. We appreciate you sticking with us for 2.5 hours.
Well, the good news is, Nick, that it's going to go onto YouTube and be there in perpetuity.
Absolutely.
So even those that weren't present at the actual live recording can indeed digest it at their leisure, 10 years from now, if it helps them.
And we're still available then.
Good. Thank you for arranging it, Nick, and leading the way with these kind of events, online events. I think they're really, really helpful and valuable in the current circumstances.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And before we leave, is there anything you'd like to say, plug for Property Tribes, anything you'd like to, you've got the camera all to yourself for 20 seconds. What do you want to direct people to that you would like to direct them to?
I just really like to say, come and join us at Property Tribes. It's free to use, and it's based on our motto that none of us is as smart as all of us.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And anyone who's interested in reaching out with me, I'm available online on my website, nicholaswallwork.com. That's my personal website that is kind of directs you off to Property Forum or Red Brick, my development company. I do one-to-one mentoring. So if anyone's interested in being mentored with some authentic track record there, who wants to know about anything from developments, HMOs, conversions, all of that kind of stuff, please do reach out, nicholaswallwork.com/mentorship. Jump on Property Forum or Property Tribes for any information related to property. We'll do our best to help you. Both Vanessa and I have got some great content on there. The communities create content, and it's really a good collaborative place to get your questions answered. So thank you again, Vanessa. It's been an absolute pleasure, and lovely having you. Goodbye to everyone. Thanks for all the questions, and stay tuned. Subscribe to Property Tribes YouTube and Property Forum TV YouTube for future videos like this. Take care, and good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.